Richard, thanks for coming in. It's about
Pleasure.
18 months in the making, I think, this. They always take a while. So yours is going to be slightly different from others in that not only are we going to go through what you've done and where you did it, I'm going to try and pin you down on how the hell you write, because I don't really know. And from your bit in the copybook, everybody says that one won it. That was the winner of that whole thing, because you're the only one who answered the brief, and you actually genuinely set about trying to explain how you write. Why do you think you're the only one who did that? And everyone else just said, look at these good ads that I've done.
I didn't intend to do that initially. I mean, I wrote several draft pieces before I arrived at that piece, and I was trying to do the sort of, cerebral thing about how best to write a piece of copy and how to get tone of voice and this, that and the other, and it all sounded a bit pretentious when I read it back. And the deadline was looming, and I was actually writing that ad at the time. Or I'd written it very recently.
So it was all fresh.
It was very fresh. And so I thought, well, let's write about... I just sat down and wrote about writing that piece of copy, and it just turned out nice, Do
you think that do you think that writers go through a similar process when they're writing copy, which is that in the beginning they try too hard and it's all a bit pretentious, and then they get to the point, if they're good, where they think, let's just get to the point and explain it better?
I think it's what you're writing on makes a difference. If, for example, if you're writing ad number 27 or 327 in a long-running campaign, the campaign has already got an established tone of voice, and you're going to try and replicate that, or
so it's easier.
But for example, Sainsbury's is a classic example of that, where David and Ron worked on Sainsbury's for 5 years before anyone else.
So no one else wrote a Sainsbury's ad for 5 years?
No one, no.
Amazing.
None of those.
And what would they do, 12 a year?
They were doing 12 a year, yeah. And, they did that for 5 years, 60 ads, right? And then, I was there the whole time that was happening, because I joined Abbott Mead in 1980, and they got the business in 79. And the ads started running in 80. So, we just watched these ads coming out. Right?
So why did David not go, oh, sod it, do you want to write that one about lettuce or whatever it is? Why was he religiously on that 5 years?
I think what happened actually was that around about 5 years in, we were offered the chance to pitch for the TV business. I think David went and concentrated on that, because that was a major piece of business, obviously.
Who was doing the TV at the time? Saatchi's?
Saatchi's had the main TV business, which was,
I didn't know they were separate for that long.
I think it was mainly price type stuff.
Right.
I know that when, which is in the Sainsbury's blog thing, when Abbott Mead got the business, Saatchi's had a go at doing a quality campaign. In fact, one of their ads is in the D&AD.
Yeah, I know that's
right
Jeff
next
Stark,
to David's.
the potato one.
Yeah, it's a really nice ad, actually. Yeah. What was I saying? Yeah.
So when the TV come up, he sort of relented a bit and said, "Can you give us a hand?"
I think he did. I think he said, "Right, I'm going to concentrate on the TV to win the business," which he did with that. The celebrity recipe campaign, which
that was a pitch idea, was it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. That was the idea that he went in with, and that's what won the business. And they shot, must be 30 commercials with all sorts of, they were celebrity recipes. They were recipes with a celebrity voiceover, and then the end shot was the celebrity with the finished meal sort of thing. I mean, it was a very simple idea, but it was
quite an influential campaign. That it's not one of the ones that I don't know whether it won any awards or whether anybody said they liked it, but it was one of those things that influenced certainly, say, Marks and Spencers or all sorts of other people.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, the photography was superb. John Clark, I think, shot most of the early ones beautifully. I mean, the food photography was just fabulous. Yeah, definitely Marks and Sparks.
So when you did that first one, obviously I know you wrote a little bit about that last week or so.
Yes.
Did you feel pressure?
Well, I tell you,
copy David's stuff.
But I tell you what, whenever John Horton, who I worked with for 30 years,
that's
I think we were the longest standing creative team in the business, and probably still are.
How many art directors did you work with before that?
Oh, probably not that many, actually, to be honest. Peter Gibb, I worked with at
BBDO.
BBDO, and before that Martin Reevely.
Right.
Martin Reevely at Vernon's, and then before that, various guys at Dorlands, which was my first copywriting job. We're going backwards.
We're going backwards. We should do this in. Let's do it in the right order.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to remember.
Okay, sorry. Let's not do it backwards.
Coming
It makes
here
it
in the
even
cab,
tougher.
I've been going. Why? Who the hell was that? When was that?
Yeah.
But
Well, I've got some
think-
stimulus.
Okay.
So let's start in this traditional way. That I know. So where were you born?
Oh yes, I was born in Blackheath in south
were
east
you?
London. Yeah, lovely Blackheath.
Yeah.
A beautiful part.
I used to live in Greenwich. Yeah, I
Did
love
you?
Blackheath.
Yeah, Blackheath, beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was born there. Yeah, in 1950. Would you believe?
1950. So
Yeah.
you must have been reasonably well-to-do.
Well, it's funny you should say it. My father was in advertising. He was
Funnily
an
enough, I found-
advertising man.
I found that out yesterday.
Did you?
Paul Burke told me that. He said, I believe that Richard's dad was a copywriter and he wore a bowler hat.
Exactly so.
And is that true? He was a copywriter?
He was managing director of an agency called A.N. Holden. Holden's,
wow.
it was called. Had an office in Mount Street in Mayfair. I know they had some Whitbread business and they had the Financial Times. I mean, I was naught when he was doing all this,
Right.
you know, naught to sort of 10.
Yeah.
And he was a classic. My father, I ought to make it clear, my dad was born in 1895.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so he was 55 when I was born.
Jeez.
My father
Old
flew.
now, it was old then.
Yeah, my father flew Sopwith camels in the First World War.
Jesus.
But anyway, I just wanted to get that in.
Good to get that out there. Give a bit
Not a lot
of
of people
perspective.
can say that. And he was the managing director of this agency. But I know that he also wrote copy. Whether he did it on a regular basis or just from time to time, I don't really know. But he was a classic old school, and I mean really old school,
Yeah.
pinstripe suit, bowler hat. Literally, I mean really a bowler hat and a furled umbrella. And he would, write a bit of copy. He was managing director and mainly a sort of client schmoozer, I think,
Right.
more than anything else. I know,
Wow.
winer and diner. His favourite watering hole was the Connaught, which
Was
was
it?
just round
Oh.
the corner.
That was
which
David
he-
Abbott's, wasn't it?
No, the David Abbott's was the Hellenic in Marylebone.
Oh, yeah, apart from the Hellenic, didn't it? Yeah.
No, Peter Mead liked the Connaught.
Was it the Connaught? I thought
Peter
they went
Mead
to the
liked the
Connaught a
Connaught
lot,
for his
yeah.
breakfast meetings, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Most people like the Connaught for their
Yeah.
breakfast meetings.
There's not many
But
Hellenic
my dad
fans.
called it the pub.
Right.
But he was a very old school ad man. And of course, I mean, because he was, by the time I was sort of 10, 15 years old and thinking, maybe what am I going to do? He worked actually until he was about 70, till I was about 15,
Wow.
and then he retired. And sadly, when he retired, he sadly got what they used to call senile dementia, which I was,
Yeah.
but it's the same problem as it is now. And so it was very sad that he never really saw my success in the agency,
Same business, yeah.
in the business, but also wasn't really in a position to help me
Yeah.
or give me a sort of foot in the door kind of thing. But what he did give me was I knew that there was something called an advertising
Yeah.
agency and something called a copywriter.
So so before you were 15, were you very aware of advertising through your dad, or did you
Not
take much
through
notice
my
of it?
dad, because no, I don't remember ever talking to my father when I was a kid growing up about advertising, about what he did. Really, particularly, I don't remember. He probably did mention it, or it cropped up
didn't
in
make an effect-
conversation,
have an
but
effect on you.
it didn't. But I do remember, and you asked this question, I know, of Chris Wilkins.
Yeah.
Do you remember any advertising when you were growing up? And I do remember things like Murray Mints. It was a classic
Yeah,
for
yeah.
me with a jingle, Murray Mints.
You
too
remember
good to hurry
liking it?
mints. I do.
Yeah.
And funny enough, they're all jingles like, "Oh, don't forget the fruit gums, Mum."
Yeah.
And I can't, but you'll wonder where the yellow went
Yeah.
when you brush your teeth with Pepsodent. I remember sort of those going in kind of
It's
thing.
funny that it seems like it was all those kind of things at the time, and there's none of those things now.
No, not really. Well, yeah, I mean,
Is there? I can't think of any now.
now, no, I don't think so. But jingles were, of course, frowned upon in our era.
Yeah.
They were absolutely anathema, and so were slogans. You know, we didn't. Oh, slogans and jingles. That was like, you know, that's the other people. We don't do that kind of stuff. Because,
But
of
then
course,
now you can remember them all word for
I
word.
can indeed.
Yeah.
And, you know, even Webster, well, the great
Yeah. Or Dave Trott was this, he
John
likes that
Webster
stuff.
and Trotty, they did plenty of jingles in their time. Fantastic stuff, you know. But no, but going back to my childhood, I don't remember really discussing or talking about advertising with my father. But as I say, it did at least, you know, I learned that there was such a thing as a copywriter. When I left school, which I did in 1968, I did A levels and stuff, but there was no way I was ever going to go to university. I just thought the only thing I was any good at was English.
Right.
And I thought, I'm going to try this copywriting lark.
Because that uses words, and I'm good with words. It was
And
as basic as that.
by that time, I had started to get to notice ads. And
Good, you like what? What would have been around in 67, 68
well,
that you
it was
liked?
around that time that the colour supplements came out. The Sunday colour subs came out. Sunday Times magazine, Observer magazine, and I just remember seeing ads in there. And as it turned out, which I discovered later on, they were virtually all done by Doyle Dane Bernbach.
Right, Volkswagen.
Dobie raincoats, well, Volkswagen, yeah. Volkswagen I found just after I left home to come back to London. I haven't explained. Born in London, but we moved down to Folkestone when I was about 10.
Oh, right.
So I grew up in Folkestone.
Yeah.
The reason we moved there was because that's where we used to go on our holidays when we lived in London.
Right.
And we had a beautiful house in London, but of course I didn't know at the time. We didn't own it. My father rented it.
Yeah.
And when it came up for sale, which it did, he couldn't afford to buy it. And he was like 65. He couldn't get a mortgage, so we had to leave it. And we went to Folkestone because that's where we'd always been on holiday, and we liked it. Or my parents liked it down there. And my dad still went commuting up to town every day. You know, it's extraordinary, really.
Did he commuted from Folkestone?
Yeah, in his late 60s, you know. Wow. And finally his agency was taken over by David Williams and Partner. Right. David Williams. This is all, I mean, it's so long ago now. These agencies don't exist. But
so what were the early things? Did you say Dobney raincoats? I don't know that.
Dobie raincoats. That was a Doyle Dane.
Was it? I don't know that work.
Yeah, Dobie raincoats. It's in the very early D&AD annuals. I haven't got any annuals before 1972, which was my first entry.
Oh, really?
I haven't got any.
I've got those.
I would love to have them.
Would you? Oh.
Yeah. There was a thing called, this is maybe a bit later than I'm saying, but I remember, I mean, you know, Chivas Regal was in there. Fabulous work for Chivas Regal.
Is that the Tony Brignull stuff?
Yeah, I think David did a couple. David Abbott, but I think mainly it was Tony Brignull. Yeah, another one of my.
So
heroes.
you remember seeing those before you're in the business and thinking they were clever or
well, I'll tell
cool
you what
or
happened.
something.
Yeah, I don't actually remember. What happened was I left school and I couldn't wait to get out of Folkestone, so I went back to London and stayed with my aunt in Lee Green, which is just up the road from Blackheath. And I had no contacts. I had no sort of nothing to go on, no leads of any kind. And I didn't really know London because we'd left it when I was 10. I wasn't. I mean, I sort of knew it, but I didn't really know it very well. But anyway, somebody said to me, "You ought to go to the IPA." Which is the Institute of Practitioners in Advertising. They have an office. I've got a feeling the office was in Berkeley Square, and I've got a feeling it was pretty much. Is it still there?
Still there.
I think it was sort of pretty much next door to J. Walter Thompson.
Right.
But anyway, I went there, and they gave me there a list of member agencies, which of course every agency in the country was listed in this booklet, you know. And I noticed that I just started reading through it, and I noticed there was this agency that kept cropping up, Brunnings. Right. It was Brunnings Bristol, Brunnings Cardiff, Brunnings Manchester, Brunnings Leeds, Brunnings London, and I thought, my God, these are the boys. They're all over the country. They must be, you know, the business. And I can't remember whether I rang them up, wrote to them, or found an ad in which I used to look in a thing in the Evening Standard called Opportunities for Juniors. They quite often had sort of, like lowly jobs for juniors.
Yeah.
Anyway, I ended up going to Brunnings and getting a job as a production charging clerk, which is someone who bashes production invoices from block makers and stuff like that. And
Bashes them with what? A stamp?
Well, a rubber stamp, which was known as the BAM stamp because it had BAM on it, which stood for Brunning Advertising and Marketing. I don't know if they did that as a joke or whether... Because I called it the BAM stamp. I mean, we all called it the BAM stamp.
So was that the thing you stamped and then people would have to sign
You got an
inside
invoice
it?
from Nicoloid or whoever it was, block makers,
Yeah.
And it was all production charging, all production costs, and block makers and retouching and I don't know what, And you had to tot them all up and you had to stamp the invoice and I guess somebody would sign it off. I don't know.
So you were the one just doing the stamping?
I was
That doesn't sound like a very skilled job.
And well, there was an adding machine involved.
Oh, you had to add up stuff as well.
Yeah.
So it wasn't all easy.
No, God, no. But I went there with the aim of, I didn't think it was possible when you started out to just walk into an agency and get a job as a copywriter. I thought there's no way they're going to do that. So I thought you get in, get a job and work from the inside. But I very quickly discovered that Brunnings was probably the shittiest agency in the whole of the...
They started the move to East London 30 years before everyone else.
They did. They did. It was in Whitechapel Road, just across the road from the Blind Beggar pub, where I think it was Jack the Hat McVitie or one of those types got murdered or shot somebody or whatever it was, frequented by the Crays and various others. But I didn't, at that time, I didn't even know that the Whitechapel Road wasn't a very salubrious part of London, really.
Compared to Folkestone, it seemed glamorous, I guess.
Yeah, and the Brunnings building, it was huge, the Brunnings building, great big concrete block, and it had Brunnings in green letters that lit up at night, bright green.
Sounds cool. Yeah.
Well, I thought it was quite impressive, I must admit.
How quickly did you realise it wasn't one of the best, most creative? Really? Because you had no experience, did you? You just...
No, but I'd already sussed the kind of advertising that
you liked,
appealed to me.
And it wasn't
I realised, I just knew immediately. They did. It was all retail advertising. They had Tesco.
Did they?
But they did little 6-inch doubles for things like Whitney blankets and other very, very obscure brands. And at that time, the magazine Ad Weekly, as it was called, used to run a thing called Curio Corner, where they'd find a silly little ad and take the piss out of it every week. And Brunnings were in there about, every other week, really, I think, So I realised, no, this is not the place I want to stay. So I was there 6 months, during which time I did get a rise from £10 a week to £11 a week.
You're laughing.
I was laughing.
10% rise.
I mean, that was, But I then found an ad that was for a voucher checking clerk job in an agency called Dorland's.
Voucher checking, that's another quirky little thing. What do they do?
Voucher checking was when your clients had an ad running in the newspapers or magazines or whatever, you got a voucher copy of that publication with the client's ad in it. It was a little sticker to say this is where the ad is.
Did you stick the sticker in?
No, I think it came from there. Or maybe I did. I can't.
What was your role in this process then?
No, I didn't get the job because what happened was when I went in for the job as voucher checking clerk, I saw Ernie Grumbridge. I saw in the voucher checking department. He said, you're overqualified for this job. Really, I think you should. I know they're looking for a junior in the media department.
Right.
Do you fancy that instead? And I said, yeah, not knowing what the media department really was. And then that's how I went up from the voucher bit. I went up the stairs to floor 2 or whatever and spoke to somebody in the media department. They hired me as a junior in the media department.
Buyer?
Well, no, I wasn't a buyer. I rang up for transmission times.
Oh, you've got to explain that one as well. All these jobs. They sound like they're from Mr. Pickwick or one of these old Dickens
Southern
books.
Television and say, I'm ringing up about the Heinz Beans commercials. What can you tell me the time, the transmission times?
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's going to appear at 7:14, then again at 8:37, then at 9:14. That's on
and you write
the
that
6th
down.
of May. And on the 7th of May, it'll be, and you write them all down. You put them on a great big
So they employed someone
A
to
huge, great thing. A schedule.
write down these numbers of when it was
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, that's what I did. I did that for, I suppose, about 6 months. But again, I had no aspirations to be a media man. I wanted to be a copywriter. I always
Yeah.
wanted to be a copywriter. And during that time at Dorland's, I hounded the creative department. Even though Dorland's was not really at the forefront of creativity, it was a decent enough agency. They did some quite nice
Well, I
work.
think when you were there, they did that Heinz work with Alan Parker.
They did.
Yeah.
Well, Alan wrote that.
Yeah.
To be
No,
to be
absolutely,
fair,
yeah. I think he just did it as a job
because
lot,
nobody
didn't
else
he?
was good enough to do
But
it.
that was done when you were there, was it?
I don't think it was. I think it was just
69,
after I left.
Was
Yeah.
it? Yeah, I know it was around that time, but
I think I just
which was
left.
great. That was
Oh, superb!
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. But he did write it. Alan. Yeah.
So, did you learn anything from those two slightly weird jobs?
Not
Helped you
particularly
in any way, or not?
because I learnt how to write copy by reading it.
Yeah.
By recognising good ads, and I don't know.
It's funny how
I
you
just
would
knew a
recognise
good
it,
ad
yeah.
when I saw one.
Yeah.
I mean, I just sort of I understood. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can remember when I was on the tube, my journey to Brunnings in Whitechapel, I would get the Daily Mirror every morning, and once a week in the Daily Mirror was a Volkswagen ad. And I used to actually, I used to get a flood of adrenaline when I turned the
Really?
page and I found and I read the copy, and it just made me gasp with its just genius and its wit and its understated. Do you know what I mean? And I read it over and over again. I could recite all those ads virtually word for word
Really?
in those days. Yeah, I mentioned this to Abbott many years later, and he said, "Go on then," and I did.
Did you?
One of his ads.
One of his ads?
I can't do it anymore.
Well, he famously did that himself when he went
He
to
did.
New York, didn't he?
He did
Covered his
indeed.
eyes up and
He did.
recited the
One of
LLL.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
funny.
he did that.
Yeah.
And
But it's
I
funny
think
that feeling, isn't it, that you had a visceral feeling based
just
on. I
understood
wonder
it.
why.
Yeah, I got it. And and that's what I wanted to do. And of course, Dorland's really wasn't doing that kind of work. I used to, when I was in the media department at Dorland's, I did go down and show some of the creative people some of my work, and some of them were quite interested in it. One in particular, a guy called Stuart Winning,
Right.
who was a group head there. He was 25, which is
Yeah, wow.
a veteran, in
Yeah.
those days. Yeah, and I used to go in the lunch break. I used to go down there and walk around the creative department. This is shocking to actually own up to this, but I used to go around all the creative. They were all out at lunch, of course, in the creative offices. And if I saw a layout, well, I'd grab a black magic marker and I'd put full points on the end of all the headlines.
Oh, really?
Because they didn't have full points on the end of their headlines.
Why was that?
Well, because people didn't in those days, except
That was the style that you
except
don't.
Doyle Dane did,
Right.
and all the good people.
How funny.
Always, Doyle Dane in New York started that, I think, really.
What,
by
full
putting
points?
Full points on
Really?
their headline.
Was that not a thing
Yeah.
before then?
I don't think. Well, I don't know because I don't really know much before then. But I started looking at ads in the late '60s when it all started happening, and I noticed that all the great ads had a full stop. The headline was usually not a wham bam thank you ma'am kind of thing. It was a thought and a sentence, and it started with a capital letter and it ended with a full point. As I call it.
So all the ads you liked were that.
Yeah, so I
structure.
used to go around and put full points on everyone's layouts when they were out at lunch.
Did you ever get caught?
No, I don't remember getting caught, and I don't even remember anyone remarking upon it, but that's the sort of thing I used to do. Eventually, I was doing ads at home. I was doing my own sort of ads, no brief, but I'd try and do a Chivas Regal ad or a Volkswagen ad or whatever it was. And I showed him to this guy Stuart Winning, and he kind of took me under his wing a bit and said, "Yeah, this is really good work. I'm going to show it to Jack Stanley,
Right.
the creative director." And then I got an interview, and I got called down to Jack Stanley's office, and I thought, "This is it. He's going to give me a job," but he didn't.
Oh, really? Why?
I can't remember why. He said you're showing a lot of
Keep
promise. He's
going.
American. He's saying, but I haven't got a spot for you right now, but this is really good stuff, and keep going. And I left his room, and I went to the loo, locked myself in a cubicle, and I wept.
Oh, you
I
kidding?
cried.
Because you were so...
Yeah, because I thought I was going to get a
Disappointed,
job,
yeah.
and he didn't give me a job, and when I pulled myself together, I went back upstairs to Stuart, and he said, "What happened? What happened?" He said he didn't hire me, and he could see, obviously, I think
Yeah.
he saw I was a bit red-eyed, and he said, "You stay here, you wait here," and he went into Jack Stanley's office, and I don't know what he said, but he came out, he said, "You're hired, you start on
Really?
Monday."
Brilliant.
Yeah. Love that guy,
Yeah.
Stuart Winning. God bless him. He died he drowned on a beach in Australia. I think he had a whiskey in his hand at the time, because he was the one. Not only did he really get me my first writing job, he also taught me about Scotch whiskey,
Right.
which perhaps wasn't such a good thing, but.
So he was a writer. He
Lovely guy,
oversaw
writer,
your
copywriter,
writing. Yeah.
and so I got hired in the creative department of Dorland's.
And how was that? So Dorland's was presumably big, but not
Yes,
that
not
creative.
great. No.
Yeah. Was there anyone good there that you kind of ganged up with, or oversaw your work?
There was no one specifically that I sort of. There was Stuart. Stuart
Yeah.
Winning was
the best.
he wasn't great, but he was. They were all kind of okay, but they were nothing like the sort of what I wanted to do. But I managed to do some reasonably good ads there.
Did you? What would you have worked on there?
Well, amazingly. I mean, I'm 18. I'm a cub
18,
writer,
yeah.
and I'm getting at. Well, first of all, I did little pokey little things, little
Small
6-inch
space
doubles
ads,
and
yeah.
little tiny little things. But eventually, or not eventually, very quickly, I was given much bigger things, and I was given ads like for British Leyland motor cars, which are going to run as whole pages in the
Yeah, brilliant.
broadsheets and the tabloids. And
So at 18 you were doing that?
yeah, yeah.
Blimey, that's early.
And I've got some of those in there.
Excellent. We'll put
that
those in there.
folder, yeah.
In the
And
blog.
I mean, I was loving every minute of it, and I was trying to do good stuff, and I think they recognised actually, that I was doing.
And you managed to get them through the clients.
Got them
obviously
through,
different.
yeah.
And did any of those get noticed by anybody that, the sort of your
No, I
the
don't
places
think
you
so.
aspired to go
I mean,
to?
I don't think Dorland's entered the creative competitions. They just didn't do it. I don't
Right.
think. Maybe they did later when Alan Parker wrote the Heinz
Yeah,
commercials,
that
but
is, yeah.
at that time I don't think they did. So nobody outside of where I was looking at my work, as far as I know. But
So how long were you there before you went to, was it Vernon's next?
I went to Vernon's. Well,
Yeah.
I was there for I think about a year and a bit maybe, and when I managed to get a few ads together, what I desperately wanted to do is get a job. I wanted to work at Doyle Dane Burnback. That's all I wanted to do in my life.
And
I
did
wanted
you-
to work at, and I was encouraged by Stuart Winning. He said, "Ring up Doyle Dane. I'll ring them for you." And he actually did ring.
Did
and
he
he said,
really?
"I've got a
Amazing.
writer here. I think you ought to see him." He spoke to David's secretary, of course. Not
Oh,
to
amazing
David.
to do that.
Absolutely. And well, what happened was Stuart got fired. Actually, is what happened. And so he was sort of going anyway.
And he wanted
but
to help
said
you out.
Yeah, he did. That's why I love him so much.
Yeah.
And he rang and he got me an interview with David Abbott.
Right.
And I went to see David with my little book.
That's
of work.
such a weird story on so many levels that he would do that.
Yeah,
that
he
he'd get
saw that
through,
I-
and David Abbott presumably didn't know him but saw you anyway
No,
because someone
exactly.
was
Just said
king.
somebody.
I mean, what a weird
yeah.
thing.
And
And how was that with David Abbott? So at the time, that was your main place you wanted to be, and obviously
Yes.
David Abbott was at least creative director, if not managing director as well.
well, he was still creative director. I don't think he'd be made managing director just yet because he saw me, and I mean he was his absolutely charming self as he always was. Shook my hand. Hello, come in, sit down.
Did you have to go through your book with him, presumably?
He went through my book and I explained.
Do you remember what he said?
I do.
Yeah. What did he
Because
say?
I can't remember everything he said,
But
but the bottom
broadly.
line of what he said was, "I think you've got some really nice things here, but we're not looking for anyone at the moment. But keep in touch." And I said, I had the temerity to say to him, "If you were looking for someone, would I be good enough to get the job?" And he said, and I remember this specifically, he said, "Let me put it this way, you're going to get better." And he was
Interesting.
right.
Yeah.
But I think what he meant by that was probably not. But if you
Not
keep
quite yet,
going,
but
you
you're
will
on
be
the
good
track
enough,
to go.
to get
Yeah.
a job here. So I still felt, good about that. I mean,
Yeah.
I would,
What
but
are
I
you
didn't
now?
think it was
19.
yeah, 19.
it's
I
unbelievable.
think
Most
I
people
was
haven't picked up a pen at
1969. I
19.
was 18. I mean, I turned 19 in September. So I don't know.
So what
And-
did you think coming out of that? Did you think I want to be here even more? I
Yeah.
suppose you must do in a way,
Oh,
because if you
man.
meet someone and you think, well, he's really nice and encouraging, and I love all their work.
I loved everything about that agency, and I got to know all the other campaigns, not just David's stuff, Dawson.
So was he
Yeoman.
your favourite writer then, probably at the time?
He and Brignull. I mean, I spotted
And was
him.
Brignull there as well?
Not at the time,
Not
no.
at the time,
I
no.
don't think he was at the
Because
time.
didn't you write something about that for the Creative Circle annual that I did with Mark Denton? You wrote a piece,
I did.
And
And I
I
put
thought-
that in there.
and I'm sure it was that, because in a weird, funny way, I designed that annual with Mark Denton, and on the first one that was produced,
Yeah.
the sort of test thing, I got it the same day I was having a meeting with David about doing some Volkswagen ads with him, and I took it over to him, and I remember saying, because I'd read your thing, I thought, God, it's really clever. I can't remember off what it is now, but I remember it being a circular thing from when you first
It was
met.
because
And he said, yes, it's very well something or other. He hated the book. I mean, the whole book was I did a blog about it, sort of, that it came up. I probably deferred
it was
to
like the Beano, wasn't it?
It
or
was, yeah,
something?
it was just- he
that's
was
what I remember.
appalled.
Did he not like it?
Oh no,
David?
it was embarrassingly awkward.
Oh,
I took it because I didn't know him too well,
No,
and there was a big piece on him saying Hall of Heroes, and
that's right. And,
And,
lots of people had written a bit
people
about
had written.
him,
You'd written a
including
lovely
me.
thing that I just remember particularly thinking, God, that's so clever. The way I can't. I should have
Well,
read it before I came.
Yeah.
And I mentioned it to him, your bit in particular, because I thought it was. And no, the book, I had to take it to his flat.
Right.
Well, I was at a meeting in his flat, so I
Yes.
thought, oh, that's a good thing. I'll take this. Nobody's got a copy. He's in it. He's the main. And he looked appalled.
Oh dear.
The Beano thing, all these
Yeah.
faded books and classical music playing,
Yeah.
and I handed it over to him, and he looked like, what the fuck is
Yeah,
this?
sure.
And then the
It wouldn't
worst thing
appeal to
was,
his sensibilities. No.
when we'd done all the Beano drawings and different bits and pieces, Mark said, oh, we should have those little things at the top. Billy Whiz, he's full
Right.
of fizz,
Yeah,
or whatever
yeah,
the
yeah.
things are.
I remember it. Yeah.
And we divided, it was right at the last minute, and we divided up, however many sections are. You write this lot, I write that lot.
Yeah.
I got David's thing. And they're not saying anything. They're just silly little rhymes.
Sure.
So it's really difficult to judge. So I wrote loads of things about different ones. And on
Yes.
David, I wrote about 6. Funnily enough, I asked Billy Mead, who was opposite, I said, look, I've written a bunch of these. What do you think of any of these? He went, I like that top one. So I thought, fuck it, let's do that. So, and then horrifically, I remembered this as he's looking at because like anyone else, you go straight to your page.
Yes.
And it said, it's embarrassing to say that, it says, Abbo. No, what does it say? He's not Abbo. Something, but he's original. Or something about Aboriginal. I mean, what a ridiculous, stupid thing. Some little rhyme. And you could literally see his eyes fall on it and almost
Yes.
recoil. And he sort of
I
quickly
can-
closed the book.
I think I can visualise
It was really awkward.
Yeah.
And I probably threw the thing in then, said, oh, have you read Richard's bit? That's really... And then he phoned me about 2 hours later and said, oh, I didn't realise you'd actually designed that book.
Now I really like
So,
it. No.
so I said, yeah. I said, it didn't. I know it wasn't. It probably doesn't quite fit in there. He said, oh, I'm sure I'll find a certain place for us, something like that. But yeah, he didn't realise that was me.
No.
But so his full horror was on display. He thought I was just.
Yeah.
But anyway, I can't remember what the point was. But no, I just
Well,
remember your story from that first thing.
Yes,
as you were
because
saying
I
it
quoted
there.
a piece of copy of his. I told the story that I've just told to you now
Yeah.
about reading his ads on the train and,
Yeah.
and getting a real frisson out of the copy as I read it, getting like butterflies in my tummy type of feelings. It was so brilliant, and it was an ad. It ended up, the end line of this ad said, what the hell did it say? You might think that's an awful lot of work to do on a car that only costs £640. It said, you're right, You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You know, and I used that as the end of my piece on David.
Right.
Because I said,
Yeah, well, that's it. I
because
remember
of
it
all
being
the
this
work
really
he
clever
did and
circular
being the
thing.
chairman of the agency,
Yeah.
running this, that, and I said, you might think that's an
That's
awful
it,
lot of
yeah.
work, Lardy. You're right. You're absolutely right. So I
Yeah.
sort of reiterated his end line.
So,
But that was,
what did you go back again for another interview?
I did. I got another
With him?
interview. I rang about 3 months later, and no, not with him because he was now managing director. And I
Right,
went
so
to
he's too
see.
busy.
I went to see Dawson Yeoman,
Okay.
who had become the creative director. And I don't think I'd met Dawson, but I knew his work quite well, you know. And he was one of the top guys in London. I mean, he's creative director of Doyle Day,
Yeah.
you know. But I went to see him. He liked my work, but he said, once again, we haven't got any jobs at the moment. But he said, I know someone who has. And he said, do you know a bloke called Tony Brignull? And I said, well, of course. He said, well, he's just got started. He's just gone to Vernon's as creative director, round the corner in Great Portland Street.
Right.
And he said, I know he's looking for a junior writer. Do you fancy, would you want to go? I said, absolutely. And he picked up the phone while I was there. He rang Brignull and he said, I've got a guy here I think you might like to see. He said, right, go round. And I went round.
You
there.
went round from that interview?
From that interview,
Amazing.
I took everything round to Tony. And Tony hired me on the spot. He looked at my work. He said, how much money do you want? And I said, whatever it was. And he said, right, when can you start? And I said, in a week's time, which I could. I was only on
you were
a week's notice. I was on a week's notice at Dawn's. And that was that. I went to Vernon's working with, I mean, I've been fortunate throughout my career of being hired by all of my heroes in advertising. Tony Brignull at Vernon's, Peter Mayle at BBDO,
David Abbott,
John Salmon hired me at Collett's, and then Abbott. You know, so I mean, all
Well,
of these
even
guys
being
are my heroes.
Even being referred by Dawson Yeoman, he's not known as an easygoing. I don't.
No,
in fact, I do
was
know him a bit. I did know him a bit, but
yeah, I used to see him in the Hellenic from time to time,
Did you?
and I knew he was a bit. He liked
He
to
was
drink.
quite
and
a
that. Yeah, lovely. I
difficult
mean, I thought,
guy,
was he difficult?
Well,
I
that's
don't
what
know. I
people
never
say,
worked with
yeah,
him.
a little bit. But
Yeah, he was a very large man, and not the
Yeah.
sort of guy you want to mind you. So's Brignull. You don't
Yeah.
want to upset these people, you know. 'Cause
So how was that then? So you've then jumped up a few leagues, haven't you? From
I've suddenly
Dorlands to
gone from
working for Tony
from
Brignull.
junior in the media department at Dorlands, very swiftly through being a cub writer at Dorlands, done a few ads, no more than about, I don't know, maybe 8.
Right.
I've got some roughs as well. And suddenly I've been hired by one of my heroes, one of the best writers
What do you think
in
he
London.
saw? What was in your?
I think
what did he
liked
see?
I think he liked the body copy, because in those days, copywriters were judged by that little, 120 words or whatever it was. Sometimes it was 620 words, but usually it was, 3 paragraphs, Volkswagen type of length of copy. And that's what they were after, is people who could write. I mean, they obviously wanted to see the ideas but it was the writing ability that it was all about.
So you're still not quite 20, are you, or just 20?
I'm not quite 20 actually.
So
when I
how
went to
did you
Vernon's.
learn to write good enough for Tony Brignull when you're not even 20? Most
I'll
people
tell you
haven't
how.
left college.
It's as I say. I devoured advertising. I read. By this time, I'd found D&AD annuals. I'd found American, New York art directors annuals. I'd found all this, and I just devoured it all. And by some miracle, I found I could do it.
Yeah.
And I could do it. I don't know. I just had it, whatever it takes. I was so lucky, because there was nothing else. I'd be anything, I harboured desires when I was 15, maybe of being a journalist. But, I'd never have worked as a journalist because the deadlines are ridiculous. In advertising, you've got 2 weeks to do things, sometimes more. And I just found I was good at it. And I learned how to do it by reading the best advertising in the world, which was all mostly coming out of America. I mean, I knew that not just the Volkswagen campaigns, but Volkswagen and Avis, which are two kind of opposite, if you like, from a
like
visual
inverse,
point of view. But they're both the same in as much as they're both slightly self-effacing.
Yeah.
About their product they're selling, and I love that understatement, you know. And that was part of it. The tone of voice, was so,
you could get that.
There was
I
a
suppose
sort
not
of
everybody got that.
tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
There was a kind of, slightly understated.
Slightly sassy. Yeah. There's an interesting thing that comes up with virtually every person I've interviewed, which is, including people like Tom McGallagher said the same thing, which is they are totally obsessive and they can reel off body copy from ads they like. So Tom McGallagher said he used to walk through Central Park with his art director, I can't remember his name now, just died recently, and they would do, embarrassingly, what I know that we would do and Tom Carty and Nick Bell would do, which is you'd say an ad and you go, who was the writer, who was the thing, and you think, God, Tom McGallagher used to do that as well. It just seems so weird. And
we're all advertising anoraks.
Yeah, but how important is it to be that obsessive? I mean, obviously that gets soaked in some. It's not an accident.
For my generation, and you know, it was mine was the perfect timing to come into advertising.
Yeah.
It really was. It was when it was all just starting, and if you had that sort of that knack, shall we say, it was fabulous. You know, to be there and be able to do this work. And we learnt how to do it by reading other people's ads. I mean, I can still remember now. There was an agency called Delahanty, Kernet and Geller. Have you ever heard of them?
Yeah. The Zip, didn't they do
Talon
the Zip
Zippers? Okay. Do you know the ad with the guy with the pavement pounder?
Yeah.
With the the pneumatic drill.
Yeah.
The headline said, "My fly used to open 50 times a day."
Right.
And there's a blurred picture of a guy on a pneumatic drill. And the copy said, "The guys at work used to take bets on how many ups and downs I'd have before lunch."
Yeah.
That was the opening line. Then there was the bit about the product, and then I discovered the Talon Zipper, la-di-da, whatever he says. And the end line was, "Man, I never knew how easy it was holding a pavement pounder till I was able to use both hands." Now, when you read something like that, I just want to shout and say,
But that's a sort of weird obsessive thing, isn't it? That a lot of people who are really good have. And I don't know whether you can get people to. How do you? Well, obviously, you oversaw loads and loads of people who are writers. How many would you say were that obsessive? I
think
1 in 10, 5 in 10.
Most of the people, we all talked about, we all discussed all these ads. We all knew the agencies, the American art directors and writers. You know, we knew Julian Koenig and and Bob Levinson and people like that. We didn't know who they were or what they looked like, but we knew the names because we got it all out of the New York art directors. And then, of course, when the D&AD stuff happened, I mean, D&AD started long before I was in the business, but it just became, we would devour it.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, you say about David looking at going straight to his piece in the Creative Circle annual. Every year, the D&AD annual came out. And I know he's not the only one who did it, because we all did it. He would go to the index to make sure he had more numbers after his name than anyone else, which of course he always did.
Yeah.
Always did.
Well, they did. I remember when I was on the D&AD committee talking about that, because they wanted to take out. In fact, they have. I don't know if it's back in, or they wanted to take out the index for creatives. Seems to be ridiculous now. No, I don't know how many pages that. I said, well, that's the first thing everyone. You don't like to admit it, but it's the first thing everybody looks at. They look at their number and then perhaps some people that they feel rivalry with or they don't like, and then you go, okay, I've got a sense of that. Let's have a look at the pictures. Yeah. But that's the order you read it.
I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen a D&AD annual for many a long year, but I think they're enormous now, aren't they?
Yeah, they are
global.
big. Well, they get often.
I prefer Creative Circle now. I think it's better.
Well, it's
not that I've seen a Creative Circle, but God knows how.
Well, you now get like
but it's British.
40 people on the credits,
Right.
Rather than 6. Yeah.
Who are they?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'll have to send you a scan of some.
Okay.
So you'll get.
Everyone wants to have ownership.
But there's like more departments and there's more. So it sounds ridiculous, but there are sometimes 40 people.
Is that right?
And they'll show a picture of a poster that someone.
What's great about I'm talking mostly about Abbott Mead and David Abbott and Ron Brown, was how much work those two guys just did, just the two of them.
Yeah,
it's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary.
The volume.
Yeah.
So what did you learn from Brignull? Was he, because he's quite a difficult
He was
character,
a tough
isn't he?
taskmaster, Tony, but I went to Vernon's. I'm 19 years old. The first campaign he gave me to do was for Amoco, the oil company.
Yeah.
Whole page, broadsheet, colour press campaign.
Amazing.
Okay. he gave me that. He gave me that brief. I started working with Andy Argaroo.
Did you? I didn't know you worked with Andy. Yeah.
I worked with him for a week, and I did actually do most of those Amico ads with Andy in that first week. But the reason for that was that the guy I was going to be working with, Martin Reevely, bless him, bless his soul, turned up at the agency about a couple of 3 weeks after I got there. Right. So I worked with Andy for a little while, but mainly I worked with Martin at Vernon's. But anyway, he gave me this fantastic nugget campaign. And, my recollection is that he bought most of what I showed him, but what he really nitpicked about, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but what he was really concerned about was the copy and how the copy was written. And he quite often would send me back just to tighten it up or make it better and this, that and the other.
And how was that emotionally?
Well, I mean, it depended on if there was something I absolutely loved and he wouldn't let me do it, I would feel real bad. But I wasn't going to start arguing with Tony.
So you'd feel bad because you would think he's wrong, or you'd feel, or you'd feel that you hadn't.
I can't remember, to be honest. But
it's a long time ago.
Large, he bought most of what I did, and I just, I don't think I realised probably at the time how lucky I was. To be pitched in.
And presumably it wasn't a huge agency, so you got more of his time.
It was a very good agency, Vernon's, for a little while. They had the Royal Navy, did some beautiful work on that.
Who did that?
We had Renault, which we didn't do great work on it, but yeah. Amico was probably their star account, actually.
So that one with the small logo, did you do that in your first week?
I did that on my first day.
Did you really?
I think, yeah. Pretty much. Maybe 2 or 3 days. I mean, here I have a broadsheet colour.
Yeah, amazing. You've got that little spec,
less
which makes
than a
it
square
great,
inch of colour.
So
somewhat extravagant.
Everybody I know has been through a similar thing, and obviously that makes you better. If you're scared it sounds nowadays people worry about if you're sort of a bit scary, but I think certainly I would hate to embarrass myself to my bosses. So I used to work for Brian Stewart. Do you know Brian Stewart?
Yeah, not really, but I know of him, of course. Very good art director. Superb art director. I don't know him.
Should have worked with better writers, really.
Yeah, but excellent art director.
So, and he was, I didn't work for him that long when I was starting up, but he was, I remember before I showed him a piece of work once, he said, are you happy with it? I said, well, ish. He went, well, why are you showing me? If you're not happy with it, I've got lower standards than you.
Sure.
He said, I now can't accept it, can I? If you're not 100%, I can't go, well, it's not quite right for your standards, but it's fine for mine.
Sure.
You're going to have to do it again, whatever it is. And I thought, he's got a good point. You can't go in with something that you're not 100% about. So I would hate to go into people I'd have to present work and risk that they would go, I haven't thought of that. Well, why haven't you done that? What are you doing? Or so it makes you try harder because you don't want to embarrass yourself.
That's exactly how I felt when I started showing my work to Tony Brignull, as a young, very, very inexperienced writer. I would spend hours and hours and work deep late into the night to make it as absolutely perfect as I could before I went to see him with it at all. Just because, do you know what? It wasn't out of fear; it was out of respect.
Yeah.
That I was not going to show him something that was anything less than the very best I could do. And as I say, he did send me back a few times, but I don't remember ever having, any sort of rows. Once or twice, I think, at Collets, he did lose his temper a little bit with me. But I probably was a bit outspoken more at Collets because I thought I was a bit more senior then, and probably I would have.
But I was just curious to know when you were saying whether you would be confident enough at that still really young age to think he should have bought this or he should have bought that, or whether you would sort of slightly abdicate responsibility and thought wherever he approves is probably right, and if he's not approved it's because I haven't done it, or whether you would still think, well, it's a subjective business and I prefer my thing.
I mean,
I know it's a long time ago.
I think Tony was actually pretty lenient to me, actually. I mean, when I look at the work that I did at Vernon's, I think, my God, he let me get away with that headline about getting up on a cold and frosty morning, which you know, and I was a bit nervous about that, but he gave me, you know, he let me do what I wanted to do, kind of thing, and he gave me freedom to do that, which is quite extraordinary, really. I guess, I mean, he wouldn't have approved it if he didn't like it, but as I say, it was more about the copy that he would maybe, you know, I would rewrite a piece of copy maybe 6 or 8 times. Only not a complete rewrite,
to him,
maybe just a slight, you know, I don't know, nuance. I can't remember the detail now, but I do remember the copy on the little logo Amico ad, give us time, that ad. I remember that just came off my pen in one hit, basically, and I knew it was great, and it is great. I'll say it myself.
Why did
I think he bought that straight away.
So, from a copywriter's point of view, what I love the fact that it says give us time, but why did you write give us time twice when you could have written it once?
No idea. It just that's how it
sounds
came out of my brain.
Cooler, but it's an unusual thing.
Give us time. Yeah, that's how I would say it. Yeah, I don't know. There's no. I think one on its own wouldn't really work.
No, but why?
Well, I don't.
It's
know.
like there's another. The only another ad springs to mind, which is the American one, which I really like. I tweeted recently that said, you call company A to buy their widgets, whatever it is. They put you on hold. You call company B to buy their widgets. You get through to thing, something like that. What to do. That's the only time I can think of it. That sort of.
I think there are other expressions like decisions. Decisions was an ad I did once, or you know, and I remember Tony and Neil did I think it was Tony, pretty certain it might have been Dawson, but I think it was Tony and Neil did a fabulous campaign for Lufthansa at Doyle Dane.
Oh yeah, promises.
That's the one, you know. But that is the expression, isn't it?
Yeah,
promises.
I think your one is more like conversational.
It's not really a well-known phrase or saying "give us time, give us time," but it just seemed to work. Yeah. It was a weird campaign, that, because it was a corporate campaign, you know, but it was all talking about, you know, the service you get in a service station, in a petrol station. And it was all based on the fact that, you know, they worked harder because the more petrol they sell, the more money they make. Whereas with a lot of petrol stations, that's not the case. But anyway, we'll go into the detail of that. But anyway, it was a brilliant thing to be able to be given.
It's like a gift, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Interesting. I don't know whether I think
he's
done that to settle you in, or whether he just liked you.
I think he took a flyer basically on me. To be strictly honest, there were other ads that he wrote one, I think, and a couple of other guys wrote. So when he gave me the campaign, I think he put the brief, or he had a look at it himself, and I ended up, I think, with 3 out of 6 or something. I did 3, and somebody else did another 3.
So what could you put down to learning from Tony? Is there any particular thing that you would say, again, I took that away when I left?
It's nothing he said, or it's just what he wrote. So, same with David. Same with every good writer.
Particularly being there with him, it was more seeing his work.
Yeah, the funny thing is, you know, nobody ever sits you down and says, right, this is how I think you should write this piece of copy. Or no, I mean, I don't really remember any of my creative directors saying, you know, talking about literally the construction of the words or the actual words or whatever. You can't teach someone. I think you have to. All you can say is that doesn't really flow from that argument to that argument. That doesn't really work too well, and you know, you've gone off the point there. It's a very witty little line, but it's off the point. So get rid of it. You know, that kind of thing. But you don't learn these fabulous writers: Brignull, Abbott, John Salmon, Tim Delaney, I work with at BBDO. They can't teach you how to write, verbally. Do you know? Other than by, I mean, you learn by, as I say, the more you read, the better you get. That's how it worked for me. No doubt.
I'm going to ask you, as we're talking about writing now, I'm going to ask you some questions on writing. So, here's something I don't really get with puns.
Right.
So I hate puns.
Yeah,
I don't get them at all. So, you've done various puns.
I have indeed.
Sainsbury's have 8 different kinds of onion, and that's shallot.
Well, I've brought that in. I did that.
So that's a picture. I should say what that is. So there's a picture of 8 different onions, and then there's a shallot, and it says Sainsbury's have 8 different kinds of onions. That's shallot.
Yeah, that is a dreadful pun, I grant you.
But
I did it as a joke. John and I did it as a joke, and we thought Abbott thought it was so funny. He let it go through to the client. The client thought it was deeply amusing and ran it.
But Abbott would write
it is
loads
appalling. He did. And
did.
That's why I put it in the blog
Yeah.
on Sainsbury's. He wrote that awful pun.
Slippers
The champagne they used to drink out of slippers, just slippers full 99.
I don't get it.
I
Why
actually
did
said to him at the time, I said, David, no. He said, oh, you know.
But it
They
makes
love
my
it.
toes curl, those kind of things.
Me too. I mean, I must admit, it's not right.
But what, I mean, I don't know whether that's...
There's
and
a certain
obviously
amount-
you'll hear people talk about certain ads and, you know, those old D&AD books are full of puns. If you were trying to be a copywriter in then,
Yes.
you'd go, well, you've got to do puns. The Roaring Fordies for Ford, Alan Parker's Hey Big Suspender and iced cream, and it's really difficult if you're not there to think, I don't get why people... Because to me,
Well,
I'm
I
trying to
think-
explain something to someone. So
Yeah.
to say, yeah, but mix up the
There
words
was-
and
Yeah,
things.
there was a terrible, plague of punning amongst copywriters. I think, throughout.
But
really.
everybody seemed to like it.
I think there are good puns and not so good puns. And
Yeah.
as Gray Jolliffe once said, who was one of the great punsters of all time, and somebody said, "Give us a pun, Gray." He said, "What do you want, an old pun or a current pun?" you know.
But I think I had a big argument at Abbott Mead when I was there with, I don't know if you know this, with Andrew Robertson.
Oh,
Because when I was looking after The Economist,
yes.
in fact, that reminds me, I thought, well, let's not do any puns. If I'm going to be creative director on it, I don't want any puns. And then Andrew Robertson come in, he said, oh, is this the new stuff? Do you know this? Have I told you?
No.
He said, is this the new stuff? So I said, yeah. It was like the day before the meeting. He went, great. So I had it all on my wall. He went, looking at them, yep, okay. Sort of took them all in. He went, where's the puns? Literally. And I went, I don't really like puns. And he went, we always have some puns as part of the mix. I said, yeah, it's not really my thing. And he went, could we put a couple in? Because we normally do. So I said, nah. I said, it's not really... If I'm looking at it's not really my thing.
You got to.
So then it's like an awkward thing. He's CEO, so he's sort of quiet. And he went, come on, and then give me a little nudge. Put a couple in for me. As a sort of friendly, but, let's get real.
That nudge.
Yeah,
it's quite annoying.
So I said, yeah. And then we're sort of both standing there thinking, where does this go? And where it went is he then spoke to someone else and got some puns, and then someone else presented it, and some puns were in the mix.
Yeah.
But it was a really awkward thing. But funnily enough, the thing I remember about putting those ads on my wall, and you probably won't remember this. So when I first got there, they used to do, I was really surprised to find that the way they did the Economist ads was all secret, at least when I was there. I don't know, it was like when, David would be judging them, but done behind closed doors, and then there was sort of some white smoke come out that said these have been bought. So
That's right.
Tony and Peter said, oh, you do it, you be creative director on it, for whatever reason. So I thought, right, brilliant, I'd just started. I thought, I'll do what we did at Simon's Palmer. You put the best 8 at any time, anybody can see where we are, and then you talk to people about their work. You don't kill it quietly in private. You say, I don't think that's right because of this, I don't think that's right because of that, we're looking for more visuals or less visuals or whatever. You have the conversation with them, and then people have got a chance to respond and say, I disagree, or I'll try and do some more of this or whatever. So that was all great. So I had these things, pinned them up, people were coming in, these sort of various young people were coming in, showing me stuff, and I'm saying, do this, do that, blah, blah, blah. And then I was sitting there, looked up, and you and John were at the door. I thought, oh, shit. I haven't thought this through. I was thinking, you're more senior than me. You've written millions of Economist ads. You've won pencils on The Economist. You've done coloured ones, this ones, that ones. I've now got to go through your stuff with you, live, like
Is
I said
that
I
what
would.
happened?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
horrified. I didn't know whether I covered
Did
it
we
up or
come in
whether
and
you
show you our
come in and showed it
lines?
to us.
Okay.
So I was
Or work,
horrified.
or whatever
Yeah.
it was. Yeah.
I thought, oh Jesus Christ! So if there was another door, I would have taken that and just thought, I'm going to duck this
Did you
one.
buy any?
I can't remember, but I
You blew
remember
them all out. Seem to
there was
remember.
nowhere to. Oh, you were at the door, and
Yes.
I can remember it clearly.
Yeah.
And thinking, oh shit.
Yeah.
Try not
Was
to
Sean
panic.
not involved in this
He
decision?
didn't really get. No, he didn't really get so involved in the.
Yeah. Because by and large, it was kind of a verbal campaign. I mean, I'm not saying
Yeah.
art directors can't judge a good line. By no way. I'm not saying that. But was Sean not? Did he not want to be involved?
He wasn't so keen on the judging
No.
side of
No,
things.
he just.
I think he partly.
Because you did the famous Venn diagrams thing, didn't you?
Yeah,
Which
well,
was
that-
like, wow,
Yeah.
complete change of direction.
Well, that was-
Different campaign, really, wasn't
Kind
it?
of. I mean, I think it's funny that because that was going to be. So I thought, if I'm going to be in charge of it, I presume like you thought, because when you started doing the Economist stuff, you broke it up and you pushed it around, and
Yeah.
before that, and I'll come to that a bit later. But so I thought, well, let's do a series of mini campaigns, because it occurred to me driving in. I thought it's sort of 10 years in or something. I can't remember, and I thought. You see them at the end of the street, you think, oh, it's an Economist ad. But you kind of know what's coming. You think they're going to say something clever about something. And I thought it would be good if it was a bit more, had a bit more surprise in it. So I thought if we could keep some element of, so if you could make it linked but different and then keep, anyway, so we
Sure.
did all that. That was going to be the,
It was very, very clever. Very cerebral, I thought, actually,
Did you?
the Venn diagram, but not very quick. I mean, I can't.
Yeah.
Did they run on the
they
side of the
ran,
street?
yeah. They
Not in
I think they ran in
cross-tracks.
tubes and cross tracks.
Because I mean, they were very much kind of like you need to have a look at them for a while. They're not quick, are they? Like
No. And I think that for a while that was going to be that quarter's
Yeah.
campaign, and then
I mean,
the
I
last
thought they
minute,
were very, very clever. But,
the last minute, I think it was Andrew again said,
we're in
I
the
think
fun.
we should just stick to the red because that's
Yeah.
David's gift to the agency.
Yeah,
That's what
just
he said.
going back because you've just reminded me on that subject when we did our first Sainsbury's ad after David and Ron had done it for 5 years, and you said, "How did you feel about that?" And I was going to say, and I didn't say it for some reason. We always, John and I, wanted to, if we got a campaign that had been long running, we wanted to just chop it up a bit,
Yeah,
change
exactly.
it. We didn't want to do Me Too.
No.
It could have been one of theirs. And that's why, if you look at the work we did on Sainsbury's, by and large, it's much more graphic visually,
Yeah,
like a sausage balancing on the end of a cocktail stick, or a potato pretending to be a Henry Moore sculpture,
Yeah.
and so on. Though, mind you, we had the products in order to do it, and it worked. We weren't doing it, but we wanted to break out
Make it
just
yours.
a beautiful piece of food and a witty line sort of thing, and just make it, I don't know, more graphic. I think more graphic.
well, I think I think it's interesting on The Economist because, let's just get my, because
Yeah, I mean, we did one with blue and red.
we did blue, but
We
it
did
looks
a
like
green one.
it looks like you've literally, obviously David had done all of them again, probably for a few years.
Yeah.
I don't know. They're all
Pretty much, yeah. He did the
all
first 3
pretty
years,
much
probably.
just type, I think.
Yeah.
So it looks
absolutely.
like, when I was kind of reviewing them before we met, it looks like you've literally broken it down into going, right, he's done all that. Let's do a coloured one. Let's do one.
Well, we did a green
What
one.
can you do? You can do one in the wrong colour.
Yeah.
You can do a multicoloured one. You could do one where the type's on the wrong side. You can
Absolutely.
do one where it's an abbreviation. You could do.
Yeah.
It looks like you've literally chopped it up, figured out all the ways you could do it, and
Yeah.
then done. I don't know if you did
That
it
was
as
definitely, premeditated. I mean,
Yeah.
we wanted to do it, we wanted to change it. And we did, for example, the keyhole one, which
Yeah, the
we
key-
actually
yeah.
did win a silver. Won 2 silvers, actually. One for best poster and one for best press
Perfect,
head. Same ad. 2 silvers, thank you very much. David actually rejected that ad.
Did he?
He
Why?
rejected it. Yeah, he said, I think The Economist is a verbal campaign, really.
Did he? Interesting.
Yeah,
So-
and we said, but David, what we've done on The Economist for the last 3-4 years allows us to do this now because we've laid the sort of cerebral ground. We know what, and I think, It's just, just to do something, not every time a graphic, but once in a while
Yeah.
do something different. He relented in the end, but he didn't really like it. He never liked it, and he liked it even less when we got a silver
really?
yellow pencil for it. Yeah.
BC, I think you
Oh, you know.
opened up the whole campaign,
Maybe, yeah.
and I think that's only why. I don't think I can't think off the top of my head many people who took the sort of essence of it and played with it. We did. We tried
Yes.
the VED things and
I
some other
think-
stuff. But
yeah.
most people would just go, well, what's our line? They wouldn't look at it as terms of, as long as you've got a flat bunch of red and you've got something clever, really, and you're on brief,
Yeah.
you can play with it a bit. But not many people did. Whereas you literally look like you've gone through all the possibilities.
Yes.
And that then opened it up for everyone else to try different stuff, whether it's
Sure.
us doing Venn or whatever. But
But that was very, very different. That was that was completely different. That was like you were pitching for the business in another agency.
do you think so?
Oh,
It's
totally.
funny, I didn't.
Yeah,
it didn't
because it
seem
bore
like
no
that to me.
relation to what had gone before, really, at all.
Oh, I think it did. I suppose you see, I'd come from Times Palmer where we did Nike, and
Yeah.
because they did, Mark would say, because they didn't have much business, every Nike ad looked slightly different because they'd want it forever fresh. So, in my mind, as long as you had an area of flat colour red and you used that font, and it
Yes.
was recognisably The Economist, and you were saying whatever the brief. I mean, I thought it was interesting that the brief would change every quarter because nobody else would ever know it's changed. But essentially, you're saying
Sure, I know.
the readers are clever.
That brief thing was a complete
it was
nonsense.
ridiculous,
That was the
yeah.
planners trying to come up with something new. I mean, the Economist campaign never really changed
No,
at all.
I didn't think so. I was
in
just
its
surprised we'd
strategy.
get a new brief every.
Yeah, no, that's just
But so to me, it was like slightly different, but the same. But so it's interesting that
was
you would
very
do the
clever.
same with Sainsbury's as well.
Yeah, we wanted to. I mean, just about everything John and I did that was, that somebody had done before. We wanted to do it differently, but still
Which is good.
respect and
Yeah,
retain a
but
bit
add
of
to
the heritage of the campaign, not throw it out the window, but like you did. But no. But yeah, I mean, I think it's instinctive with any creative to want to do. I want
Yeah.
to do my.
You want to do your
my
version.
version of it. Yeah, I think so. They did that at Doyle Dane when Volkswagen came over to Doyle Dane, London, in 1966 or 5 or something. Dawson did it with Dawson Yeoman was given the campaign. He did completely different ads, big headlines,
Yeah.
little visuals, and wanted to do it, and they had to be told no. In fact, I think Bill Bernbach came over and said, we've been doing this for quite a long time over there. It seems to work well. I think, out of respect for the campaign, I think it'd be nice to just do it the way we do it, which is what they did.
But he went way too far.
Yeah.
Just changed the fonts, changed everything.
Oh, he
didn't
changed
they?
the
Yeah.
tone of voice
Probably
and
the tone of
everything.
voice as
I
well.
didn't see the ads that he'd done, but I've read about it. Yeah, he completely changed.
So,
I want to tell you the story of when I was hired by Peter Mayle at BBDO.
go on then, let's get back to the structure. So,
I'm at Vernon's.
You're at Vernon's.
With Tony.
Yeah.
What happened was
What happened?
Tony left after about 9 months, I think, after I joined. He was offered the chance to open or help to open Wells Rich Green in London.
Which
the
is an amazing agency at the time.
Big,
yeah.
very successful
Like
agency
DDB
in the
almost,
States.
yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. And he and Neil Godfrey were hired. And it was the first time they'd ever worked together, Neil and
was
Tony.
it?
Yeah. Were hired to open Wells Rich Green in London. And they did. They took this job, which meant that, of course, Tony left Vernon's. And I brought along as well the letter he wrote to me when he left, which is one of my proudest possessions. But you can
feature that,
put that
yeah.
feature in the thing. But and what? Yeah. So Tony left, and a new guy came in from nowhere, a guy called George Potier. I think he came from Leo Burnett or somewhere like that, and nobody knew who he was or whatever. He's a very nice chap.
Yeah.
His greatest claim to fame, actually, is that he held the world record for a Paul Beagle shark. He caught the world's biggest Paul Beagle shark on rod and line.
Right. Weird.
George Potier. I think he was was he Canadian or something? I can't remember now. But anyway, he came in, and I think there were cost cuttings to be made in the agency, and he fired half the creative department, but not me.
Yeah.
He fired Martin, and he fired various other my art director.
He fired your
Martin.
art director, but
he
not
did,
you.
but not me. And I was rather somewhat disgruntled at this turn of events, as you can imagine. I mean, you know, all the best people had gone, and the not so good people had been left behind, and me. I didn't consider myself one of the not so good, but I was obviously one of the cheaper ones.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was completely, you know, didn't like what had happened at all. As luck would have it, Martin very swiftly got a job at BBDO, which had just been merged with PKL. BBDO bought PKL in London.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it was a classic reverse takeover, in as much as all the PKL people stayed and all the BBDO people didn't stay. So Peter Mayles was suddenly the creative director of BBDO, having been PKL creative director. And you know, there was a PKL creative department there, but because they had way more business, they needed to hire more people. Martin got a job there, and there's no doubt. Well, he did. He said, "I've got a really good copywriter. I'd like you to have a look at," to Peter. So I was invited to go and see Peter Mayle, show him my work, which I did. He liked it, and he said, "Well, very nice." He said, "How much? What kind of salary were you after?" And at the time, I think I was on about 2,750 at Vernon's, maybe a bit less. And I thought, I'm going to go for $3,000. So I said, "Well, I'm thinking sort of 3,000." And Peter Mayle said, "I never believe in paying people what they ask for. How about 3,250?"
Oh, really?
And I thought, thank you, God. I love this place.
Amazing.
You know, and I did.
And what was he? So he's someone whose work you'd admired before then?
Yeah, I'd seen. Peter wasn't the most prolific writer. I mean, he was a creative director of PKL.
Yeah.
He did some very nice work on Harrods. I mean, he was a very good writer, copywriter.
Yeah.
His mantra was always get your work done before lunch.
Right.
Which was because he enjoyed lunch and quite a long lunch as well. But if you get your work done before lunch, then you can have a decent long lunch. That was not such a good thing for me because I was not a very good timekeeper.
Right. So you didn't get in early?
They said I used to turn up to work with a copy of the Evening Standard, that day's Evening Standard. But I would like to point out that the evening edition of the Evening Standard did come out at 10 o'clock. But yeah, my sort of turning up time for work was usually round about sort of 10:15 type time.
Yeah. It didn't give you long to...
It's not very long, and then obviously lunch starts about 12:30, or you've got to start thinking about it, and then
you've got to cram in a day's work.
You're not going to get back
2
till
hours.
about 3:30. So, do you know what I mean? So, but Peter was a joy. He's such a cool guy, and had a fantastic creative department there. Paul Whalen was there, Mike Cousins, and John Kelly and O'Driscoll were there. It was fantastic.
So what was his
Ron Brown
skill?
Peter,
yeah.
Total creating an environment.
Highly of him.
He hired people that he liked and that liked each other. It was all about the social thing. I mean, obviously you had to be good. You had to have quite good at writing ads, but he loved. I mean, the average age of that creative department, I reckon, was probably about 26.
Wow.
Peter was by far the oldest. He was about 35. Tim Delaney, who when Peter left to become, I can't remember. I think he went to New York or something. I can't remember. But Peter left, and Tim was made creative director. He was 28, Tim, when he was made creative director. And it was just so we were all young. We're all so young. We're all 21, 22, 23. I mean, if you're 25, that was veteran. You know.
And wasn't that a really rowdy, drunken party sort of place?
It was. I wouldn't say. Well, not. Yeah, it was. Drunken. I'm not sure about drunken, because one of the.
If you go to lunch at 12:30
of the fun was Paul Whalen, who was never a drinker.
Was he not?
No, Paul not a drinker. No, he was a bloody hard worker, but he enjoyed a bit of fun. There were a few reprobates there. John Sherfield. Various people. I mean, there were some naughty stunts went on. Like we used to throw. This is so puerile and childish. We used to throw water bombs out the window
Right.
on the passers-by underneath, and occasionally they would come in and remonstrate with the poor receptionists on the desk downstairs who would deny all knowledge of it. No,
Yeah,
it couldn't possibly be from us. And the worst thing I remember was, and this was Wayland, I think. Oh God, I hope he doesn't sue me for libel. But he and another guy, Jemmy Gray, who was art director there, they were working on something that involved a mannequin, a shop window dummy. So I dressed this dummy up. It was a female one. Dressed it up in whatever. I think it was off a shoot. It was a female, and they hung it as if from by the neck in the lift.
Oh wow.
So and then sent the lift down to the reception. Where whoever it was coming into the agency, and the doors open, and there was this, rather unpleasant sight of a hung.
So how many hours a day were you working then at that point? By the time you get in at 10:15,
Well,
you
during
mess
the day.
about a bit, go to lunch at 12:30.
We worked we worked a lot of late nights.
Oh, did you?
Late-ish
Yeah.
nights. Quite a lot. I mean, we often
Were you
were there
working
till
hard or not?
8:30. Yeah.
Right.
Pardon?
So you worked hard.
We did work hard,
Ish,
and we,
but it was fun.
but to be honest, we did have. It was we had a lot of time in those days,
Yeah.
and also if the work wasn't ready, they cancelled the meeting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They rang the client and said, "I'm sorry, but we're not ready. We haven't cracked it."
So what was Tim like when he took over as boss? I used to work for Tim.
Tim was a Rottweiler, as you
Was
know.
he? Yeah.
Yeah, he was. Oh, great. I loved
Was he
him.
like that before he was boss, or did he adopt that?
He was He was always quite sort of spiky, Tim, but in a very funny, great sense of humour, great acerbic wit.
Yeah.
But could be quite unpleasant, as I'm sure. Well, I mean, when I say unpleasant, he cared so much about that. I don't know anyone who cared so much about the work as Tim. He's absolutely a hero of mine, particularly his agency, Delaney, in their heyday, were just fantastic. The purest agency in London, I think. They just did not compromise and would rather fire the account,
Which they did a lot.
which they did plenty of times. They did such great work. Loved Delaney. And I loved him, but he could be quite acerbic. And I didn't, because I left BBDO quite soon after he became creative director, so I never really had him as a boss for very long.
Right.
And he was always, he knew John and I were, probably going to leave, because a lot of BBDO people had left to go to Collets, and we all wanted to work at Collets, CDP. And eventually we got the call.
But
And
weirdly,
that was
you
that.
went to Kirkwood's before.
Ah, yes.
Why
now
did you do that?
Oh, yeah. Well, what happened was, when I first went to BBDO in 1971, I went there, I think it was latish in the year, and I was doing some nice stuff with Martin Reevely. And then Martin, I think, went on holiday or something like that, and I was working with Paul Walter all of a sudden. Not that that had anything to do with my decision to leave, but what happened was some friends of mine decided to go and spend the summer in Greece, on a little island in the middle of nowhere in Greece. It was a bit hippie sort of thing. And they said, you got to come, man. You got to come with us. So I quit my job. I have the best job in London, it was at the time. And I'm only 20. I think I was 21 by then. I quit my job in order to go to Greece for 4 months of the summer of 1972.
Right.
And they were shocked that I would be leaving to do such a mad and stupid thing. But Peter Mayle, God bless him, said to me, if we've got a job for you when you come back, you can come straight back in.
Did he?
And I said, oh, thank you. Thinking, yeah, well, we'll see. So I came back from Greece in, I don't know, October or something of that year, penniless. And I had to get a job. And I got a job at Kirkwood's. I can't remember the circumstances. I knew Len Weinreich. I'd known him from Fletcher Shelton. Was it? No, not Fletcher Shelton.
He was
No, Weinreich, Alders Marchant.
old as Marchant.
I don't know. Anyway, I knew Len vaguely, and I rated him a bit. He'd been at PKL, actually, Len Weinreich. And he was a clarinet player as well, so it didn't hurt. Anyway, I went to see Len Weinreich, and he hired me, straight away. Because I was doing some good work, I had a pretty good book by then. he hired me. This would be in the beginning of, I think, either end of November or beginning of December, something like that. And 2 weeks into that job, I'd done some work. I can't remember what it was for, but an account man came in to my office and wanted me to change something. This is before taking it to the client. And I just said, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. He said, but I'm not, there's no way the client's going to buy this. You have to. And I said, look, I'm not going to do it. If you want to change the copy, you can do it, but it's your ad, and don't come back to me with it, because it's no longer my work, it's your work. So if that's what you want to do, you go ahead and do it. But as far as I'm concerned, that's my ad. If you don't like it, do it yourself, basically, I said. I was a bumptious twat, really. I was a, out of order, really, probably. I was probably quite rude to him. Anyway, so I got a call that afternoon from Len. He said, I think we need a chat. So I went to see Len. He said, we're not really getting on too well, are we? I said, no, we're not, Len. He said, I think probably best if we part company. I said, yeah, I think so too.
2 weeks?
I think I was there 4 weeks.
4 weeks.
Maybe even 6, possibly.
Right. Wow.
But I do remember when I got back to my desk, this is just before Christmas, by the way. When I got back to my desk, there was a little envelope on my desk with a Christmas bonus in it.
Wow.
I don't know, I can't remember how much it was, £100, I think, or something like that.
So then you went back to BBDO?
So I quit. So, I got fired from Kirkwood's for being rude to an account man, and then it was Christmas, and then in January, straight after the New Year, I got a call from Peter Mayle or somebody, or Ron, I can't remember who it was. Peter was still there. Anyway, they said, if you want your job back, it's yours. So I said, oh, thank you very much, I'd love to. And I did.
Amazing.
So I went back to, he was good, as good as his word, Peter.
Yeah.
And so I went back to BBDO and spent the next, I think, 4 years.
You've had lots of people being very nice, haven't you? It just occurs to me, from Stuart to
Winning, yes.
To Stuart to Dawson saying, I'm going to phone my mate now,
Yes.
go over there. To
Peter Mayle taking me back. Yeah.
paying you more than you asked for.
Yes, that was
To
quite
Peter saying, come back.
good. Yeah.
When
All
some people,
my career, people say there's a lot of nasty pieces of work in advertising. I never met any of them.
No,
maybe one or
doesn't
two,
sound like
but
it.
I won't mention any names. But literally one or two. Actually, probably one. But
So then you went back
everyone
and did
was
some
fan.
great stuff on, particularly Sony.
Did some very nice stuff on Sony. Yeah. I mean, again, what a fantastic account! It was a Doyle Dane account in New York. Sony, we won it.
Yeah.
We won it in London. BBDO won it in a pitch, and everyone worked on it because it was such a big account.
Well, I can remember as a small child seeing Lifelike, isn't it?
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if someone said, asked me the question, what ads do you remember as a kid, or had an event, I could name probably 10, and that'd probably be one of them. I just thought, God, that's so clever.
Yes.
'Cause
That was the very first ad that John and I did.
Was it?
In 1975, when we...
So that's when you first hooked up?
Yeah, because I've been working with Peter Gibb, and it was when Tim was made creative director. He had a little reshuffle, cabinet reshuffle, or agent, department reshuffle, and swapped everyone round. And I got to work with John Horton.
And was that who was sort of further
to me,
down the
John
line?
was, he was like a top man. He worked with John Kelly. They were a fantastic team. They'd won silver awards at D&AD. They were a superb team. So I was highly delighted to
How
be
was
given.
he? Was he delighted?
Well,
or?
he says he was, yeah. He said, no, he definitely said he was, yeah. But I mean, John Kelly was a great writer, John. One of the few who was equally good at press and telly, because there's no doubt about it, I was much more comfortable in press than I was in telly. But that ad, the dotted line, that was the very first ad I did with John. We did it in 20 minutes in
Did you?
one afternoon, yeah.
He seems quite, what's the word? Tonally, it seems quite different for most ads around there then. I don't know whether it's because it's sort of sarcastic or what the vibe of it is quite, I don't know.
I've always been very, very pleased with the opening line of the copy on that ad, which says, we really must hand it to our advertising boys. And then it goes on to say they've come up with a an ingenious way of demonstrating Sony's
Yeah.
amazing Trinitron colour system or something.
So how did you? So you, obviously you spent 30 years with John. How was the first bit? Did you think this feels comfortable, or was it
Yeah, very
a bit
much so.
tricky? So you just thought it
No,
just
well, I'll tell you
fitted?
what happened. We only worked together for maybe, I don't know, a couple of months max at BBDO before we got the call. Well, I got the call to go and see John Salmon at CDP.
Because he'd seen something he liked. Of
I
yours,
think
or
Brignull. I think Brignull
Brignull
put in
put
a
a
word
word.
for me. Brignull. I think. Yeah, I think he was my. What's the word? He.
I know what you mean.
He. What is the word? I was. He.
It's a really good word.
Anyway. He. I think he kept an eye on my career, so to speak, and it was. I'm certain it was him who got me into CDP.
And how was that interview? Do you remember?
Fantastic.
Was it
With John Salmon?
another
I can tell you.
nice bloke
I can tell you.
being nice?
I had some very nice work to show him. I mean, they knew
Yeah.
my work now
Yeah,
because
by
I'm
then
beginning
you'd
to
won a
get
lot of
work
awards,
into
yeah.
D&AD and stuff, and they knew what I'd done. But one of the things we'd done very recently was a pitch for the Building Societies Association, and it was a pitch in competition, BBDO in competition with CDP, and CDP won the business. I think there may have been a couple of other agencies. A very strange campaign, actually. It was to sell the concept of building societies. Right. And it was all about, our campaign was all about, this is how building societies work. Some people save for the building society, give their money to us, and other people borrow from a building society, and we give the money that the savers give to us to the install. Anyway, it was a nice, gentle campaign, but Collins won the business. But this work was in my book when I went to see John Salmon, and he looked at it. He said, "You should have won the business."
Did he really?
He did, yeah. And he loved my work, and he said, "Well, how do you? I think I've just been made a group head at BBDO." They were trying to keep John and I. They knew we were a bit twitchy, and we wanted to go to Collins. Everyone wanted to go to Collins in those days. That was the place to go. And quite a lot of BBDO people had gone to Collins, and we wanted to go as well. So I've been made a group head. So John said, I'd said, well, I'm a group head now at BBDO and copy group head. And he said, well, how do you feel about being a group head here at CDP? And I said, well, that sounds very nice, John, And it was just so polite and lovely and civilised. I didn't have to do anything. Basically, would you like the job? Yes, I'd love the job. I got, a little bump up of salary, not much. I mean, I would have paid them to go to college. I got a car. And the other thing, John and I, basically, the interview was with me, and he said, "Do you want to bring your art director?" We know John, of course, if you want to bring him, or if you'd like to work with someone else. And I said, "No, I'd love to come with John, because we've just started working. We're working very well together, this, that, and the other." And that was that. And we were hired. I was 25. I was 25. I was a copy group head at Collett Dickinson Pierce. Can you believe this? And not only did I we got a nice salary, $3,000 car. We also got a company American Express card.
Oh, are you kidding? What, to just use on what? Lunch?
Well, in lunches, things like that. And it was
Evenings.
suggested to us, so I shouldn't say this, but if, for example, you wanted to go on holiday, but it might coincide, say, for example, with a location recce, then, you can charge it to the card. And we actually never did that, actually, but that's what they kind of said. Yeah. They sort of said, as long be sensible, but it's fine. And we never saw a bill. It just went straight to the college accounts department, and they paid it, free cash. And they stopped it when it was Lovelock, I think, Terry Lovelock. Started he's not abusing it exactly, but he bought a lot of clothes from Brown's in Bond Street, but suggested it was a restaurant bill. It was like £800 for a suit or something like that from Brown's, and he tried to.
They pulled everyone's cards,
and they thought, well, this is
agencies used to be rich in those days.
Yeah, I mean, especially Collets. I mean, I don't know where all the money came, but they would hire. The thing about Collets was they hired people from other agencies, a bit like Man United.
Yeah,
they'd rather that team work for them than work for the competition. It was basically, they didn't necessarily have a spot for you. I mean, we were hired as group heads, John and I, but we never had a group.
Oh, did you not?
Not immediately, not until right at the end, actually, halfway through, when we got John O'Donnell and Graham Cornthwaite, who'd been working with, I think we were working in Ron's group and weren't getting on very well, and were unhappy, and we said, we'll have you in our group if you want.
Ron Collins?
Yeah, Ron Collins. A brilliant art director. I want to go on record to say that.
Yeah.
One of my absolute brilliant hero art
he did
directors.
some amazing stuff.
Oh, superb.
So was that intimidating getting into college? And
that was actually, even for cocky me,
even for you.
Even for me, I was very nervous and very, I mean, it's like, you're in the bloody, this is the cathedral of advertising, and everyone.
So how did that show itself? Did you just work incredibly hard, or you just, what did you do? How did you?
Well, we just did what we did, the very first account we were given was Barclays Bank, which had been started by Neil and Tony. Yeah. Press ads, black and white press ads in the broadsheets, and it was selling the concept of a bank account. That's how long ago it was.
Really?
Yeah. Selling to people who were paid in cash, for example.
So put it in a bank.
Put it in a bank, much better in a bank than under the bed, or what I mean, a biscuit tin and all this sort. I mean, that was like, when you read it now, it's unbelievable. And that was the first account we worked on at Collets.
So when you finally became group head, or you had a group, or you had a team,
yes, with John.
How did you adapt? Was that the first time you'd overseen and
I think it was,
had the power of yes and no over people's work?
We had been made group heads at BBDO, but again, I think that was sort of just a sop, a title to keep us in, sweet sort
Key
of
is
thing.
whether
I
you've
don't
got a
think
group
we
or
had
not.
a group at BBDO. But at Collets, I mean, we just took O'Donnell and Cornthwaite because we liked them.
Yeah.
And they were not happy. They weren't, going to get fired or anything silly like that, but they weren't happy with Ron. I mean, John and Ron didn't really see eye to eye quite often. And John, as you know, is quite he's a bit shouty sometimes.
John is?
O'Donnell.
Oh, John O'Donnell, yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard he is.
I beg your pardon.
I've not seen that.
No, John O'Donnell. Well,
okay.
I've
heard John O'Donnell.
A very dear friend of mine, so I'm certainly not going to libel John, but he was, quite a spiky character.
Quite spiky.
But we liked him, and Graham Cornthwaite, who's, lovely guy. So we took them into our group, and I haven't, for the life of me, I can't remember what on earth we did now, but it was nice to have them, and I can't remember really how, what they worked on and whether we,
So did you ever have to show your work to John Salmon?
Often, yes.
Did you?
Yes, he was the ultimate creative director, other than, of course, Frank Lowe, who was the ultimate creative director on his accounts.
On Frank's
So if you
accounts.
worked on Heineken or Olympus cameras or I can't remember now.
So was Frank Lowe like? So various people have said that, and tomorrow morning I'm doing a podcast with Frank Lowe.
Right, fantastic.
So, and one of the people, few people that I know have said, well, Frank was sort of really like the creative director.
He was, yeah.
Was he? That's
on
true.
his own accounts.
On
he
his
was.
own accounts.
Oh yeah, he would overrule John or Tony or Neil.
Really?
If he felt
if he
it
felt
was
strongly.
necessary. And I think that
And
did
obviously he
happen
had
a few
good judgment.
Oh man, he would not take a piece of work down to the client that he couldn't die for. You know what I mean? He wouldn't do it. And that was true of most of Collets. Most of the work you did at Collets, it wasn't getting it through the client; it was getting it through the agency was the tough bit. Because if it got through the agency, 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, it will go through the client because that's how that agency operated. And Frank was, totally instrumental in that.
What do you think his skill was, Frank Lowe?
Number one, as I've already said, he will only take work that he can die for to the client. Having got that work, he will die for it. If for example a client, Frank took some work to a client and the client said, "I'm sorry, it's not right," or "I don't like it," Frank would be in shock in front of the client and say something along the lines of, I just don't know what I'm going to say to my creative team. I just told them this morning this is the best advertising work this agency has produced in the last 5 years. I know this campaign is absolutely right for your business. How am I going to go back and tell them I failed to persuade you to run it? That was the kind of, that's how he kind of did it, and he meant it actually. You know, he did mean it. I remember we did a campaign. This wasn't the client actually. This was the ITVA. We did a campaign for Heinz low-calorie soups, John and I.
Right.
A TV campaign, and the ITVA blew it out. I think it was the ITVA, if I remember correctly. And Frank threatened to withdraw the business from television and put all the money into press, unless they
on Heinz,
changed their mind, which they did, because they didn't want to lose the revenue, or didn't want to lose Heinz as a TV. That's the sort of thing Frank would do. I mean, without doubt, and I have the greatest respect for Peter Mead, one of the great account men. But for me, Frank Lowe, best account man ever lived. Absolutely brilliant. And he could be, difficult to work with.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if he didn't like your work, you did it again. It was that simple. You didn't go around. I mean, people often used to say, well, John Salmon likes it. They didn't cut any ice.
It didn't cut any ice with him.
I mean, John and Frank were totally, loved it, respected each other totally and utterly. But sometimes Frank would say to John, "I'm sorry, I don't think this is good enough," and John would say, "Well, maybe you're right. We'll have to do it again." That's the way it was. Yeah.
So it occurs to me that if anyone had to write a list of the best 5 writers in the business, David Abbott, Tony Brignull, John Salmon, and Tim Delaney would be in anyone's.
Yes.
And you're possibly the only person who's showed copy to all of them. Is there anyone else who's done that?
Actually, I'm sure there must be.
Is there?
There must be, because those guys have worked in the best agencies, and usually the best people work in the best
But that's
agencies.
4
I know.
of them.
I know.
There might be some that have done 3.
Well, maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you a little quick fire round on those.
Oh, God.
So, who was most helpful to you out of those? You can just say one name answers.
Blimey, most helpful.
Yeah.
I got to say David, because
Who do you think's best? Horrible question to ask, but
well, I find it incredibly difficult to separate David and Tony.
do you?
I do. Although they're very different, actually. If you look at their work, very different. I've got to give it by 0.5%. I've got to give it to David, because I think David was the more natural writer, natural talent.
Yeah.
Tony's work was much more studied, and I mean, Tony used to agonise over every comma, and
Yeah.
in fact, he didn't like commas, to be honest. But,
Oh, really?
but he would torture the piece of work, to get it perfect. Whereas David, by and large, wrote his in 20 minutes. It just flew off his pen. It was just as well, because David was unbelievably busy. Don't forget, he was running the agency. He was chairman of the agency. He was a creative director of a big department. And he still turned out about 200 ads a year.
Yeah.
Unbelievable work rate. But he needed to be quick, and he was a quick writer. I mean, some of his speeches are fantastic, David's.
Yeah.
So I've got to give it to David.
All those. Wish I could find all those. They must exist somewhere. All those speeches and memos and all that.
I've got a few.
Stuff. Have you?
Well, yeah.
They should put them
As
out
you
there.
know, we were going to do a book
That's
together
right, yeah.
about
We
David.
may still do one day. You never know.
I hope.
Yeah.
I had an idea in the taxi coming over that if enough people who listen to this podcast write in and say, please write the David Abbott book,
You're going to do it.
I'll get back and do it.
We'll put
I think we need quite a lot of
you need a
people
bit
to
of
say
public
that.
pressure to say.
Yeah.
Well,
I think
I'll put
if a
voting
1,000
thing with this.
people say
1,000.
I want, I'll get.
Okay.
I think 1,000
be
would
able
be
to do
about
that.
right,
Yeah.
wouldn't it?
All right, we'll put something with this that says "Vote if you want a book on David Abbott."
A book on
See how many
David
we
Abbott,
get.
and it would be a fantastic book.
Yeah.
And we were going to do it together.
Yeah,
weren't we?
that's right,
But
yeah.
I bottled out, really.
Well, you haven't bottled out. You just haven't done it yet. That's all.
Haven't done it yet. Anyway, yeah.
So, before we move on to Abbott Mead,
Hmm.
obviously you won a D&AD gold at
Yes.
Collett's, and that's the point when D&AD got. Sometimes there'd be no gold in the whole annual that year, whereas now I think if you turn up, you get a pencil anyway, just for
Right.
turning up on the night, because they're sort of very free and easy with them now. But then it was literally there would be a whole annual and there'd be no golds in a whole book.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
I can't explain how rare they were. I mean, I think now they give out, I don't know, golds like maybe 20 a year.
Do they really?
Yeah, it's quite a lot, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, but then it would, if that might be, I don't know with that book, but that might be the only gold in that book for the whole year. They're so
In
rare.
that, yeah, I don't know. I can't remember now. What was interesting about gold awards for print work in those days was that the pencil, the black pencil, was only given to the art director.
What was it? It's a
in
good system.
print.
What was it?
Not to the copywriter. Although
So you
the
didn't get one?
copywriter, I didn't get a pencil.
Didn't you?
I got a certificate, gold award, and I
But
am
not
a
a
gold.
actual pencil.
But what happened was later, just in fact, the next year or a couple of years later, D&AD started publishing in the front of each annual previous D&AD Gold Award winners,
Yeah.
and it didn't. It said John Hall.
It didn't feature you.
It didn't put my name on it, you know. And Tony Brignull, who won 3 D&AD golds as well as 18, I think, silvers.
Right.
He wasn't credited for his gold awards that he did with Neil on Bird's Eye and whatever it was. I can't remember now.
So obviously they've amended that now, I presume.
Yeah, they
must have
amended
done.
it about 5 or 6 years later, but they didn't backdate it.
Are you kidding?
So even now,
in
you're not down as a gold
award winner?
No,
Oh,
it says
that's
previous.
ludicrous.
No, and you know, so I never got a black pencil either. I mean, I did win a gold,
Yeah.
but I never got a black pencil. But when I left Abbott Mead, John arranged for me. He rang up D&AD and got them
And
to
got
make
one.
me a black pencil
Did he?
with my
Brilliant.
name on it as a little leaving. I mean, he left. Actually, John left about 6 months before me
Oh, did he?
at Abbott Mead. Yeah, for various reasons. He just, you know, we both come to the end of the
Yeah.
line really at Abbott Mead. But anyway.
Well, let's go to the beginning of Abbott Mead.
Okay.
So, you kept those letters, which is amazing, and I think
Yes.
what a brilliant way. It's interesting with when you come across correspondence or stories of David Abbott, and they sort of run the risk of being cliched and saccharine because they're always so nice. You think,
Yes.
is he just? And anyway, so your one I hadn't obviously seen because
No.
it wasn't copied in on it in 1980 when he sent
No,
you your thing.
No, it was
So-
private in those days, but I
Yeah.
think now, well, it was, you know, and I
Well-
wouldn't reveal it until
No, of
about
course,
now
yeah.
because it
Well, it's-
was a private thing, but of course,
But
yeah.
obviously, at the end, you can't help but read this bit, which I kind of copied down, which said, I'm sending an identical letter to John, and nothing I've signed since we started the agency has given me more pleasure than these 2 letters. You think, God, what an amazing way to start. You
That's
feel like $1 million walking through the
totally.
door.
Totally. And he, you know, I mean, I know it sounds sugary and saccharine and all that, but I promise you, he meant it. He absolutely meant it, you know. And that's the mark of the man, you know. He knew. I mean, to get any kind of praise from David Abbott. I mean, he wasn't you know, he was generous in his praise, but he knew how much it meant to people. If he said, I really like the ad you've done, and he did it a lot because he knew how much it meant. And to write something like that on that letter, well, I mean, that's why I've kept. Well,
Yeah,
I was never.
absolutely. But
And the other letter from Tony when he left Vernon's is one of
another
my
amazing
proudest
thing.
things. You know, I mean, you know, it's just beautiful.
I think it's to make the effort, and you know, there's so many sort of examples where he made that little extra effort, where he's probably at the time running between meetings, people are queuing
course.
up,
Absolutely.
and it's not enough to say, "Here's your contract, it'd be great to see you."
Yeah.
There's like a really nicely. Go on, what's the time now? How long have we got?
Half an hour
Okay,
max.
we can cut that
Quarter.
bit later. So. What was I going to say? So one of the nicest things, slightly that I've heard recently-ish, is Mike Griffin. It just makes me laugh. It's such a sort of thoughtful thing of David and it's sort of weird, which is when Mike was called by David to come in for an interview. I think when he started, he was like a production guy.
He was.
So he's like a young, rough, Cockney production guy.
Yeah.
David said, "I'd like to have a chat with you." Do you know this? What this?
I don't.
Story?
I think I do.
Mike
but
told me.
Okay.
And in fact,
I
he
haven't heard it.
completely broke down when he was telling me.
Okay.
Which is a good thing, I think. So he said. David phoned him and he went, "Oh God, it's David Abbott." And David said, "Oh, I'd like to talk to you about coming here, blah, blah, blah. Should we meet at this pub?" So Mike got to the pub early, very young, and he thought, "Oh God, I'm having a drink with David Abbott. I need to buy a drink. I won't get a beer. I'll get something more sophisticated." Completely overthinking it, thinking, "Oh, how do I look a bit more grown up and sophisticated?" So he ordered something like a pina colada. With an umbrella and a cherry, and because he thought, "I've got to look sophisticated." It's David Abbott. So then David turned up, and this is what you think, God, it's so funny to react in this way. So David looked at him and looked at his drink, and Mike said, "Can I get you a drink?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll have one of those." So he ordered whatever he had, which was a silly drink, and I think they may have had a few sips, and David said something like, "Do you like these?" And Mike went, "No, not really. He didn't know me neither. Should we get a beer?" But you think, what a thoughtful way of...
Yeah.
He must have obviously picked up that...
Yes, that he was
He's
trying to be
he's trying
a bit
to-
more
but
sophisticated,
just-
and I'll have what
he's
you're having. Yeah,
so
it's
sort of
so
charming
sweet.
to pick up what's happening, to
Yeah.
make him feel comfortable rather than saying,
Absolutely.
"Why are you drinking that silly
Yeah,
drink?"
I've never heard
And
that
then,
story.
Mike told me, and he then
Yeah.
kind of came over all emotional, because it's such a
Yes.
unusual
Yeah.
way to behave, in a good way. So why did he get you out of college? How did you end up
Well,
going there?
I think Abbott Mead wanted to get some television people in. Now, John and I had done a bit of telly at college, but we hadn't set the world on fire with our television. We did actually win a British Television Gold Award, actually, at College, for a commercial we did for Robinson's Barley Water, would you believe?
With the ball boy.
Well, that was one of them. The first one was the groundsman.
Right.
Yeah, setting up the court. And it was shot by Tony Scott, actually. Anyway, it went gold at British Telly. But I'm not quite sure. I mean, David had been aware of my work. I know that. And although I didn't know David, we'd met a few times, like on juries and things.
Yeah.
And, you know, he knew about me.
Had he connected you to the young kid who'd come in and said,
I don't think
am I good enough?
he had any recollection
No.
of that meeting. I did ask him about it one time, and he said, "No, I don't remember that specifically." I mean, he used to see people every day
Yeah,
of his
I'm sure,
career. I mean, he was unbelievable. But I think I'm not quite sure what. I think it was they wanted some television presence, if you like, you know, and because John and I were at college, David knew our work in print was certainly perfect for Abbott Mead Vickers, but he thought we had better TV credentials than perhaps we actually did have.
Right.
But I think that was the reason for us. And I'd always wanted to work for David. I mean, I really, really wanted to work for him at Doyle Dane.
Yeah.
I did have the opportunity to work for him at French Gold Abbott, but
Oh, did you?
yeah. It was at the time, exactly the same time, when Peter Mayle came back, said, you can have your old job back if you want. So I took that because, but anyway. And all the courting of us was done by Peter Mead, not by David.
Really? I wonder what that was.
Because David basically was a very shy man.
Was he?
Very shy man. And I think he found it. I don't know what it was, but Peter Mead did all the courting, and we had several lunches with Peter. And don't forget, we were working. It was a very tough decision for us because we were working at the best agency in the world, so to speak. You know, and yet I wanted to work for David Abbott. So and John and I were umming and ahhing literally for months.
John
And
I'm guessing perhaps more thinking, should we stay? If he didn't have that.
Yes, he didn't have the David.
Didn't have
Got to
that
work
pull,
for
yeah.
David. Well, he'd worked with David before at French Gold, actually, John. He was at French Gold for a
Right.
little while between jobs at
Okay, so
BBDO.
that-
That's another journey. But David, John knew David, but I think, I mean, without being boastful, I think David would have wanted me to be there. I mean, we had a total simpatico, David and I, in terms of copywriting.
Yeah.
And, so, as I say, all the courting was done by Peter, and he was very good at it, lovely, all relaxed, lunches round the corner from the agency in oh God, I can't remember, not Wigmore Street, doesn't matter anyway. But just not a fancy restaurant or anything like that, just a nice little steak bar around the corner from Badmaze Street. And in the end, we decided we've got to go for it. And as you've seen from the letter, there was quite a nice inducement.
Absolutely.
In terms of, which was
Looks
unheard
amazing.
of. Unheard of.
Was that big then? Because I
Well-
look at it now. I think,
I tell you
wow,
what was
that's amazing,
happening.
yeah.
The agent, Abbott Mead, had already done a deal with SMS. SMS already owned 49% of Abbott Mead Vickers. And the plan at that time, when we went, was that the agent, AMV, were going to sell the rest to SMS within the next 2 or 3 years. I don't know why, but that was the plan. And if everything had gone according to plan, our shares, which I haven't explained, we were offered 2% of the equity each, John and I, of Abbott Mead Vickers.
Yeah.
It wasn't a public company, of course, then, but 2% of the equity for £1,000.
Yeah.
Okay, which in fact they even loaned us the £1,000 to buy. Do you know what I mean? So we didn't. We'll sort that out later.
Yeah.
So as well as going to Abbott Mead Vickers with a nice salary, a very nice salary, a very nice motor car, £10,000 of motor car, which I managed to persuade Peter Mead, in my case, should be a Porsche 911, even though he would rather I had a Porsche 924. But as I explained to him, Peter, we have to keep up appearances. And he understood that because he's a bit of a car man. So rather than a new Porsche 924, I've settled for a second-hand Porsche 911. Much better. Anyway, so we had 2% of the equity. And at the time, if they'd have done the deal with SMS, that 2% would have been worth about 30 grand, which was, as you can imagine, serious. Thank you.
Yeah.
What a lovely windfall that would be.
2 years
in a
after
couple
you
of
joined.
years, exactly so. And of course, continue to work there and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
That's what would have happened if they'd have gone that route. But of course, the agency did rather better, perhaps, than they had envisaged. And in the end, of course,
Unbelievable.
SMS were jettisoned in favour of BBDO. But in all very politely, I mean, SMS, huge agency in New York, and it was but there was no way they were going to sell out to SMS after, I think by 1985. Well, we were ready.
No.
The agency went public in 85.
So presumably, I read that article in Direction with you in your Larry shirts and your expensive silk
John
fancy
bought me that
shirts.
shirt.
And obviously it comes up in that of why they keep getting offered creative directorships elsewhere.
actually,
They may set up agencies. Why are they not doing it? And now we know why.
I don't know if you noticed, that article was written by Theo Delaney.
I didn't notice that.
And Theo Delaney was a nephew of John's wife at the time, who was Debbie Delaney.
Also, that was
a sister of Tim
yeah.
and all the other Delaneys at the time. Now, that's not the case anymore, but they were at the time. Now, Theo, did that article. So we did suggest in the article things that weren't necessarily true. that, well, what we were
So it was a
suggesting
big
in the article,
PR puff piece,
well, sort of, yeah,
rather
we
than
were
a
sort
gritty-
of. Actually, it was true. No, it was true that we were seriously
Well, I'm sure you
considering
must have
setting
been.
up on our own. Everyone else was doing it.
Yeah.
You know, Duckworth Finn and
How seriously
Howell
did you
Henry.
consider that?
Pretty seriously. We'd spoken to a couple of people about the possibility, both of whom were at Abbott Mead. We
Yeah.
weren't looking outside.
Yeah.
I mean, but it never came. It never happened, and it really deep down inside, I don't think it was ever going to happen. But because we suggested that it might happen.
Instant rise,
Yeah, I'm
presumably.
afraid there was a large sudden rise. I mean, I felt ashamed actually. But not quite.
Yeah, they got
But
by.
David, I can't tell you how generous Messrs. Abbott, Mead, and Vickers were to John and I. I cannot tell you. I don't just mean financially, although certainly they were that. But in every way you can possibly imagine, man. I mean, it was just the most. It was, you know, it was a fabulous place to work. So lucky. So lucky. Yeah, great times. We were there. Well, I was
What do you
there.
think was the best period?
We were
'Cause
there
you
for 25 years.
Oh, was it
25 years. 25
Yeah.
years. I was at. Well, we both were. Even though John left a few months before me, but that's. The best, I think, the golden years were when we moved into Aybrook Street, which was, I think, was 81 or 2.
Yeah.
The 80s. The
Yeah.
80s through to. I mean, it didn't stop though. And then we moved to the red building on the corner of Old Marylebone Road, which was a fantastic building with sort of bubble lifts and all that. I mean, those were. When I look back, I know it's nostalgic and all the rest of it, but honestly, it was just beautiful and gorgeous and lovely. It was a fabulous place to work, and we did great work, and you know, everyone. It was a really happy place, you know. Yeah, fabulous.
Is it? I remember at the time that it was said that David would go round trying to kick people out the office at a certain point, that they weren't, to make sure they didn't work too late. Was that true?
I don't
Have you not heard
remember
that? Because
No, he didn't do that with us, and we
Did
were
he
often
not?
working late.
Okay.
I don't remember him
Around
doing
the
that.
Aybrook
What? Go
Street
home? No.
Yeah. Is that
You've
nonsense?
worked too hard.
Yeah, is that nonsense?
No, I don't remember that. It may well be, but because it's the sort of thing you might do.
Because I remember talking to Brian Byfield, who would say that when they worked together, David would work like all night.
Yeah.
And they'd have this inside
yeah.
joke about burning the midnight oil.
Yeah.
That on the surface, it would seem like it was all very easy,
Yeah.
but actually he'd really work much harder than everybody thought.
Yeah. I know that David did a huge amount of work, and probably quite a lot of those Sainsbury's ads he would have done at home on the kitchen table at late at night, or very early in the morning. I mean, he was always at work very early in the morning anyway, but he by and large didn't work that late unless there was a pitch or something like that. He was just, he worked at home. He did a lot of work at home. And used to, he would come in the morning. I mean, Ron would say he would come in the morning with like 8 Sainsbury's ads, all fantastic.
Right.
He'd done them overnight.
He'd done overnight.
Yeah, just went home, did them.
Do you think-
most people watch the telly. He's writing ads.
Do you think he art directed by proxy? It's a controversial
I think
question,
he
because I can't
chose
help.
his art directors in a way that he didn't want any mavericks or people getting a bit too overexcited. He wanted a malleable art directors, I think. But
Yeah.
I think those art directors were highly delighted
That's not
to
knocking
be.
any of the art directors, but
Not at all.
Obviously, since we particularly, I got lots of the work together potentially for
Yes.
a book, and I can't help notice a what would you call it? Not a style, because it's not all the same style. A sort of sensibility through all of that. So with the art direction,
there's
as
no
well.
doubt about it. Yeah.
And he didn't like things fussy. And funnily enough,
No
Paul
way.
Burke told me only yesterday that he was the production. What was he using production? And he remembers that ad that said, "If we don't sell our mints
in a day.
in a day, we don't sell our mints." Where it says. And he said initially that looked something else, and Paul did this sort of slightly more complicated layout. He said, and that had been sent, and at the last minute, it was nope. Let's just have a simple picture there and a thing.
Well,
And you think, I can't help but think, having looked at all David's stuff, that's if you'd have seen the sort of layout before, that it's gone. It's too fussy. You're
Yeah.
breaking up the reading.
there's
it's
no
too
doubt
fussy.
about it. I never
Let's
saw
do
it.
that.
I never saw it or heard it, or I have no evidence to support it. But
No,
I'm
I
sure
haven't.
that's
It's a
true
theory,
because Yeah.
And even with the Sainsbury's ads, you can almost see him. I don't want to say anything because I don't know. I'm not saying anything about Ron, but you can just see the sort of simple. Things are laid out as simply and elegantly and as easy to explain as. There's no real tricks, and I mean that in a good way. In that it's.
I know exactly what you mean, and I
and
understand.
that follows all the way through whoever he's working with, and you think, that's
Well, when you,
coincidence?
I mean,
Well, he would, for example, he would. I've read something that he would, or did I hear it? That he would sort of cast the type. That's one of the questions I was going to ask about writing. That he would think that the font that you choose is like the voice, and he would be very involved in which font.
very
you would
much
set
so.
up.
He's very into type,
Yeah.
David, and all that. As I was,
Yeah.
actually, I love type.
You're
and
another
I'm
century school book.
If I don't
guy,
like the
aren't you?
type, I will tell the art director. And
Well, that's one of the questions I was going to ask about writing. Is would you advise writers to be involved in typography choices?
it should come naturally to them, because how your words look is important too. You know, I think it's crucially important. How a headline is, how the breaks are in the headline, and so on and so forth. We took a huge amount of care over that. I mean, most good art directors. I'm talking. It's all print we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you that David wanted plain, simple art direction.
Yeah.
Pretty much all the time. And if you look at the very early Sainsbury's ads, which I studiously didn't put in that article, in the blog piece, the very early ads, they were cutouts, number one. Some of them, they started off doing illustrations.
That's
actually,
right. I mean, they look like photos, but
they were hyper, dreadful. And that
Slightly
actually,
naff.
that was David's idea.
illustration.
Yeah, it was his idea, not Ron's. But anyway, they were cutouts, and the headline went right across the spread, and they weren't as iconic as they became. I wouldn't know whether David made that happen or whether Ron did it of his own accord, but that's the way. That's why I didn't want to show the very early Sainsbury's ad, because I think that campaign had a little bit of a stutter to start with. First 6 or 8 ads. There's some good ads, but they didn't look quite right.
No.
So I wanted to start with the ads that looked right, and you know.
So
but
I think if you're interested in the fonts and what they say, and then obviously I can remember David talking about a campaign. In fact, I think he mentions it in John O'Driscoll's film of him, that he did of his that he really hated, and he hated it because of the layout. And I bet you know which one it is.
I do.
The Lufthansa one.
No, it is Lufthansa. Yeah.
And when you look at it, that doesn't look like his stuff. It's all fiddly, and it's like there's cutouts. And,
it is.
But it's funny. He's
Doug
mentioned
Maxwell,
that to me 35 years after, so he's obviously rankled him for quite a long time, given the amount of work he's done. To still, you could tell that he thought that's been wasted. That's literally, I can't redo that. That's been completely wasted. Whereas, if you feel like that when the work's going on, particularly after that experience, you gotta politely.
I think
suggest.
all writers have that feeling from time to time with art directors that that's not how I saw it. I mean, most writers, when they do, certainly I do, and David did, when we do an ad, we draw the box.
Yeah.
I'll do the line in centred. Do you know what I mean? It's just a default position, but that's how I like my ads in a way. And when an art director comes along and you know, if a copywriter shows a rough to an art director, the first thing the art director is going to do is do it differently to the way the copywriter drew it, unless over time they learn that actually that's pretty much the way the copywriter would like to do it. But I think David was certainly like that. He would always put a box around his ads. Always. He didn't just write a line. He would do the box and the visual. You know.
And funny enough, Brian Byfield told me said the thing that used to make him laugh is that they'd be working on something. David would do a box and then think, oh no, that's not right. And he'd throw away the whole sheet of paper. There was nothing in the box, as if. So rather than thinking, I've moved on, it's like, oh no, that thing. There's nothing in it. It's just gone. It's just a box. But.
Yes. I've heard that one. That's a good one. I've got to go in in about 10 minutes.
Okay,
Dave,
fine. That's fine. We're literally nearly there.
Yes.
Because we've sort of gone backwards and forwards. Let me see.
I'm trying to think if there's something
So-
I wanted to say,
Yeah.
but anyway.
No, go on.
I can't
Say,
think- no, I
say,
can't
'cause we've
think of
got
anything.
A last
I
minute
was-
sort of wrap up.
I have
thing.
rehearsed this
Have you?
conversation,
That's all right. No, it's been great.
but it hasn't
So-
turned out anything like the way I rehearsed it.
No, well, it's probably good.
Yeah.
So a couple. I just want to, before we go, ask you a couple more things
Okay.
on writing for me
Yes.
as much as anything, because
Okay.
I don't get when, when you wrote that thing last week, people say, "Wow, it's so easy to read." You know, Ben Kay said it's like reading Richard's stuff is like slipping into a warm bath in a nice way.
Yeah, right.
I don't.
That's not a bad line.
Yeah, I don't get. What is that? How do you write like that? So
Wow.
I can read
You
things and think.
can write well too.
Can I?
Your stuff I find very amusing. Actually, you've got a
I
good
can write
sense of
what I
humour.
think, but that's
Yeah.
different to
No, it's not.
structuring
It's not
it.
so much a construction thing. Yours. It's just that you've got a nice turn of phrase and a nice way of putting things. For example, when I said to you, when you sent me an email saying, "How about Thursday, the 6th of February?" Or this? No, I think you said Thursday. What day is it today? Is it
Wednesday.
It's Wednesday the 6th, isn't
Yeah.
it? No, Wednesday the 7th. What's the date today? Anyway,
Yeah.
well, you got the date wrong, and I said
Right.
I've checked my diary, and it is Wednesday. Is actually the whatever the hell it is today, the 6th.
Right.
And you wrote back saying, "Hey man, I like the way you roll, cross-referencing dates and days." Now that is funny to me. I love that.
But I,
You know,
that's, but
taking the piss.
yeah,
in other
I can take the
words.
piss,
I
and I
love
can write
that.
things that I can
Yeah.
write my thoughts down. But that's not quite. I've got no sense of. I don't know about rhythms and you
No.
stop and short and long and when they intersect. And for example, that people say you've got to use small words. It's much better if you use small words. And you think, what about all those great big words like?
Well, I like big
colloquial
words
and
as well, if they're
kumquat and-
sometimes. I mean, in our heyday, in the copywriter's heyday, which is the 70s, well, the late 60s, 70s, and 80s, if you look at any advertising copy, you'll find it's short sentences. Each sentence is its own paragraph. It's so easy to read. It's easily laid. Well, look at any Volkswagen ad. 3 columns, and they were rigid. Those VW ads, 3 columns, 7 lines a column, and X words a line, or whatever it was. And when you kind of write with a structure like that, it tends to make you write in a certain way, bit.
But you're doing that rhythm thing now that I
Yeah.
can't get a sense of that. So for example, someone said again on your thing, I think you'd used a sort of 1 or 2 word sentence.
I love
Blah, blah,
those.
blah.
Yeah.
That's true. Something.
Don't
so where
laugh.
do you? Obviously, you've got some sense of where you put those in to get that rhythm.
I think it
don't
just
know how
has
you
to
get that.
I think
That's
it
what-
just has to be natural. It just has to be the way you think. You write the way you think.
Yeah.
I write the way I think. Although I tend to agonise over mine much more than you do over yours, and if you agonise and over edit your work, you lose the freshness of it actually. But I'm not very good at writing very long pieces, hence the non-appearance of the David
delay in
Abbott
the book.
biography.
So far, we're going to get 1,000 people saying write
I
that
hope
book.
so. But if I can just explain one
Go on.
thing about copywriting.
Yeah.
When you see an ad for Volkswagen, and it's talking about how many coats of paint they put on the car, and they just show the shell of the car, no wheels or anything, just the shell, no glass, nothing, and they say, after we paint the car, we paint the paint.
Yeah.
I mean, when I see stuff like that, it just makes me want to write ads. I
Yeah.
love that. The other
But
thing,
that looks so easy, doesn't it?
but it's a beautiful thought.
It's
After
a
we paint
brilliant
the car,
thought.
we paint the paint. It's beautiful. I mean, most people would say, we give the car 15 coats of paint for extra weather resistance or something. The other thing I had again, it's a Volkswagen ad, and I remember there were 2 ads virtually the same. One was done for Volkswagen, the other for Peugeot. I can't remember the agency, both in America. Both ads had the same visual, which was the car they were selling, surrounded by all the technicians and people who checked that car, all the fault, to check that it was all right. The Peugeot ad said, no Peugeot leaves the factory until it's passed 1,786 quality checks.
Yeah.
The VW ad said it takes this many men to inspect this many Volkswagens.
Yeah. Brilliant.
That's the difference.
But they look so easy. It's like probably my favourite
it
ad
takes
today of yours
Yeah, go on.
is, which again looks so easy. It looks like you just did it on the way somewhere. Says essentially. In fact, let me get the line rather than me remember it. So that it's accurate. So it says it. I can't find that sheet of paper.
What was it for? And
It's
I'll tell
basically
you.
for the. It was the hand and the little kid. It says it changes your life. It should also change your car or something.
Yeah,
like
maybe
that.
it should change your car.
Maybe it should change
yeah.
your car.
Yeah.
Because that looks like there's no effort, zero effort. I mean, there is
I
obviously.
wrote that just at the time my own daughter was born.
Yeah,
So I think that's what inspired
it
that.
probably came into that.
Yeah.
But it's. I love the fact that it's not a picture of a baby,
No.
and it's more emotional than a baby because it's such a.
Yeah.
It's a little. If you've had a baby, just the little hand and the adult hand, and it's such a zoomed in thing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot not being said. It's like so emotional using so few things.
Yeah.
Doesn't say
Well-
doesn't say any of the key things.
And, it was always quite difficult to do a Volvo ad that doesn't show the car,
Yeah.
and that one doesn't. We never had a pack shot of the car either.
No.
We were allowed to do that from time to time.
Brilliant. Okay. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Dave.
Pleasure. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, it's nice to talk about a subject I know something
Yeah.
about, which is, me.